Unleash the full potential of your interpersonal skills and gain an unparalleled advantage in decoding, analyzing, and positively influencing the people around you. There'll be nothing you can't do.
Hello, this is Eric Holt, and you are listening to How to Analyze People Reading Body Language, Speed Read People, and Crack the Code of Human Behavior to Protect Yourself from Manipulation, NLP, Dark Psychology, Mind Control, and Persuasion Skills, provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now, let us begin.
Introduction. Do you want to know the secrets to analyze people using dark psychology? While reading and analyzing people may sound unethical, it can also be a fascinating and useful skill that you can use in your everyday life. Some may look at the entire act of analyzing people as menacing and creepy, but having this skill can definitely do you a lot of good. It is a sort of defense for you and your loved ones. Honing this skill also contributes to your self-improvement and career advancement. Basically, the act of analyzing people involves interpreting nonverbal and verbal cues. You can use it in seeing beyond the masks worn by people, thereby letting you see who they really are. It allows you to go beyond logic as it will not give you the entire story of anyone. It is important for you to be willing to surrender to important forms of information, which is a big help in reading crucial nonverbal and intuitive signals given off by those around you. To analyze people, you should be willing to surrender all your preconceptions as well as emotional baggage, like ego clashes and past resentments. You have to be objective and neutral as you receive information so you won't end up distorting it. While the process of reading and analyzing people seems complex, you will be able to learn it with the right guide. This book, How to Analyze People, will be your ultimate guide in learning how to use dark psychology in analyzing people. It provides comprehensive information about the subjects, plus offers tips for using them responsibly and without losing your sense of morality. After reading this book, you will be more enlightened on the basics of analyzing and reading people. You will also discover how to use this skill without harming those around you. Understanding human behavior. What makes people tick? When you hear the phrase analyzing people, you may immediately look at it as the process of reading minds and body signals. However, that particular notion oversimplifies the process as it does not only involve reading the thoughts of others. What you do is that you get information from them, specifically those that you can use in swaying interactions in any direction. Instead of reading thoughts, analyzing people allows you to gauge their personality, motivation, and other important tidbits of information based on the way they behave. It requires you to not only talk to a person but observe subtle clues that will help you identify what makes them tick specifically. With the help of this technique, you will uncover the real personality of anyone. This means you get the chance to delve deeper, allowing you to see what's inside of them aside from what they put out in public. Dark psychology defined. As the name suggests, dark psychology is all about studying the dark side of people. It is a collection of somewhat illicit techniques. In the most extreme cases, when you use dark psychology, you can potentially make people question their own mentality. This means you can possibly push someone to despair, which is why dark psychology can be a dangerous weapon if used by the wrong people. What you should just remember is that you can use dark psychology to gain as much information about people as possible. Be prepared to experience some difficulties and challenges when trying to learn this skill, though. It's a slippery slope. If you are not careful, your moral compass may end up being irreparably ruined or skewed. Why is it important to analyze people? Do you think it is worthwhile to learn how to analyze people? The answer is yes. Here are several reasons why you have to consider honing your ability to analyze people and what it can do for you. Helps unmask dishonesty. Do you have the tendency to trust people and the words they say easily? Does this kind of trust cover apply even to people you just met? If that's the case, you may want to hone your skills in analyzing people to know if they are indeed worthy of your trust. This does not necessarily mean that you should always suspect that people are lying to you. What's important here is to determine who amongst those you interact with you can trust completely. It allows you to detect the honesty of those around you as they interact with you. You will essentially be always a step ahead of anyone whom you are having a conversation with. It will make you almost impervious to any attempts at deception. Improves conversation skills. You don't necessarily need to use dark psychology for this. Just knowing how to analyze people to translate and understand verbal and nonverbal cues that usually come up in all conversations is enough. As mentioned earlier, most cannot express their actual thoughts through their words. A lot of nuances get lost if you do not read the person's expressions and tone of voice. Analyzing people is not just a way to get under their skin. You can also use this skill to understand what they are saying, thereby providing them with an acceptable reply. This will make you much better at holding conversations and keeping them interesting. Boost your self-confidence. Are you overly self-conscious? Do you worry about how others perceive you? If your answer is yes, you can increase your self-confidence just by analyzing people so you can easily gauge if your negative thoughts about your self-image are warranted. If you know that you can somewhat unmask people's true behavior and intentions, you will feel more confident when it comes to interacting with them. Your confidence will be bolstered, knowing that you can detect how genuine those around you are. Increases your charisma. How does analyzing other people help boost your charisma? It does so because it transforms you into a better conversationalist. The reason is that it makes you more adept in giving the appropriate response in every conversation. With dark psychology, you can somewhat guide anyone to agree with you, and they won't even notice what you've done. Charisma is when you can convince people to your side, even when you start as enemies. As you analyze them, you will know what they like and what they need to hear to make them like you. Helps keep you safe. Analyzing people can help keep you safe most of the time. One reason is that it allows you to avoid those who have bad intentions. It allows you to use the same techniques that law enforcers use to gauge the threat levels of perpetrators. Once you notice and sense any hostility for those who are close, you can immediately escape from that setting. But how about if the person is already in your face and actively stirring up a conflict? If you cannot flee from the encounter, you can use dark psychology to further analyze them and manipulate the encounter to de-escalate the situation quickly. It gives you enough time to study and confuse them while developing the best escape plan through your mind. Makes you a better negotiator. You will become a much better negotiator if you know how to analyze people. Let's say, for example, you were shopping for a used car. This skill is a big help at spotting the manipulation tactics used by most car salesmen. It also helps you protect yourself against them. Also, if you master the technique, you can use the same tactics against the person, but with such subtlety that they won't know what you just did. This makes it useful even on swindlers and scammers who are trying to fool you. You will have a more successful career. Do you always have trouble asking for a pay increase? Then analyzing people can be of help to you. By honing this skill, you will be able to know your worth and approach the right people that can help give you a more flourishing career. With dark psychology, you can see through people's deception, and you will be more or less immune to gaslighting and other manipulation techniques. You can immediately detect if there is indeed a chance for career advancement in the specific field you are in right now. If there isn't, then you can immediately get out and make one for yourself. Important things to be wary of. Now, are there drawbacks to using dark psychology in analyzing people? The answer is yes. While there are good sides to this skill, be ready to face its downsides too, which usually include the following: potential damage to your mental health. Analyzing a person's behavior may cause you to develop a jaded perception of humanity and even paranoia. The reason is that this skill may cause you to uncover every dark aspect of human behavior, which may end up in you feeling like everyone's out to get you. It is important to be mentally stable and strong to deal with the challenges you may experience during this journey. Also, accept the fact that everyone has a dark side, even you. It is just part of human nature. Learn not to judge other people too hastily and keep your biases in check. You may deal with aggression. If you're just a beginner, those you are analyzing may notice what you are doing. This can lead to animosity and often aggression. You also risk alienating yourself from your social circle if they knew about what you were doing. This is especially true even if you do not apply this skill to them, as they will start doubting your intentions and sincerity. You may lose control of your moral compass. If you wish to be skilled in analyzing people in dark psychology, you will need to have strong mental fortitude. Once you see the dark sides of people, you will feel like you are justified to antagonize them as well. Just as Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. Do not be too quick to judge people and then punish them according to your skewed sense of morality. If you are not careful, you will end up becoming an even bigger monster than how you perceive others. Key factors affecting human behavior. As you begin to study the basics of analyzing people, you will realize how different each one is based on their unique behaviors and characteristics. Just like fingerprints, you can't expect to see two people having exactly the same behaviors. This is why you should avoid generalizing, making it kind of difficult to analyze people at first. If you are really serious about learning everything about how to analyze people, you should also learn a few factors that impact the development of their behaviors, including the following: biological and physiological attributes. One factor that determines behavior is the set of hormones coursing through a person's body. For instance, men have more testosterone, so they are usually more aggressive compared to women. However, physiology can also affect hormone production. Adolescent males are more aggressive because their bodies suddenly produce more testosterone than their brains can handle. Meanwhile, older women who are undergoing menopause can also become quite aggressive and antagonistic. The reason is the imbalance of hormones brought on by the significant drop in estrogen production after reaching a specific age. Socioeconomic status. If you grew up with a lot of financial struggles, then it is highly likely that you will develop certain behavioral issues like lower self-esteem, higher aggression, depression, and anxiety. Someone lower on the socioeconomic ladder typically has higher levels of aggression and hostility and is more discriminatory. Meanwhile, those who grow up well and on top of the socioeconomic ladder are usually more sure of themselves. However, they are also the ones that are at risk of developing certain behavioral issues like narcissism and neuroticism. Culture and nationality. Your behavior may also be shaped by your cultural background. A country's culture comes with a set of unwritten rules enforced within the family and the community. Your behavior will be molded by the culture that you grew up with, as you would often consult your cultural rules on how you should react to different situations. The ethics of human analysis. Can you really be considered ethical if you use dark psychology to analyze people? This might be a hard question to answer since ethics can be subjective. However, it is important to have a set of morals to follow when you are using rather illicit means to gain information from people. Is it possible to remain ethical even if you are using rather clandestine methods to get results? In general, dark psychology revolves around studying and analyzing human behavior, especially its dark side. At its core, it is about identifying and exploiting the cracks in another person's psyche. It requires you to observe and analyze people. You will have to look for signs of weaknesses and inconsistencies that you will then weaponize against them. A lot of professionals often use dark psychological tactics to earn their keep. But the question is, are they all inherently evil? The answer is no. While some professionals use dark psychology for selfish and evil reasons, Others are responsible enough and use it only when necessary. Can you be an ethical dark psychology practitioner? Is it possible to use somewhat illicit techniques and still be ethical? Yes, you can still be ethical while towing the line of ethicality, though this is quite difficult. Dark psychology, in essence, is a tool, and tools are not inherently evil. The trouble starts when you use them recklessly and without any regard for others. In addition, not all people who use dark psychology are even aware that they are using it. With that said, who are the people who commonly use dark psychology? Lawyers. Unsurprisingly, a good chunk of the users of dark psychology are lawyers. Some attorneys rely mostly, sometimes even entirely, on dark psychology tactics to win their cases. They would even use persuasion to get the kind of answers that they need. Public speakers. Even your favorite public speaker might be using dark psychology techniques. They would sometimes use dark psychological methods to get whatever kind of reaction they want from their audiences. They would use dark tactics to get a rise from the audiences so it would be easier to sell anything to the attendees. Politicians. It is yet again unsurprising to learn that politicians are also experts at using dark psychology. Just like public speakers, politicians would use dark tactics to persuade and manipulate people into believing that they are the only ones who are worthy of their trust and votes while the others are not. Salespeople. Of course, salespeople rely on making sales to earn money, so it is only natural for them to use dark psychology to convince people that they need whatever it is they're selling. These are just some of the professions that somewhat require those in their respective fields to actively, or at least sometimes, use dark psychology methods. Arguably, most of those who use dark psychology to analyze people as their profession are not inherently evil. Some of them are even unaware that they are already utilizing it. How to keep yourself ethical when using dark psychology. Whenever you are using dark psychology to analyze people, your main goal should be to get a mutually beneficial outcome. This might be quite difficult, especially since it will be easier to just use dark tactics to manipulate the other person to get whatever you want. Humans tend to follow the path of least resistance, so doing the right things using dark methods is understandably difficult. For instance, a salesperson can truly believe that whatever it is they are selling will really help their customers. The salesperson might use dark psychology tactics to convince people to buy, but their intentions are not evil at all. But does your desired positive output justify your need to use dark psychology? Of course not. Having this mentality when analyzing people will make it easier for you to slip into the sinister side of dark psychology. It may constantly delude you to think that what you are doing is good for others when, in fact, you are causing them harm. If you want to somewhat keep your moral compass pointing in the right direction whenever you are planning to use dark psychology, ask yourself these questions. Will the tactics I'm going to use cause irreparable harm to my relationship with the other person? How do I feel about using dark psychology in this situation? Does it feel right? Or do I feel a sort of self-doubt as there seems to be something that is stopping me? What are my goals for having this interaction? Can people benefit from it? How? Will this interaction lead to long-term benefits for the other party? Am I openly honest about doing this? Am I forcing myself to justify my actions? Reevaluate the need to use dark psychology if your answers start to cause you to doubt yourself and question your moral compass. Do's and don'ts of analyzing people. In addition to evaluating your motivations for analyzing people, you need to set rules for yourself. Treat these as guidelines to help keep yourself in check so you can prevent yourself from jumping off the deep end. Do. Protect the privacy of the person you are analyzing. Whatever information you get from your interactions, make sure that you keep it to yourself. Never use any information to defame or humiliate the other person. Regardless of how others treated you, never stoop to their level and use your skills to take revenge. Strive to get the most accurate information that you can. You will risk making the wrong assessment when you stop your analysis prematurely. Yes, you have to speed up when analyzing people. However, you should strike a balance between speed and thoroughness. Otherwise, you will be sacrificing the accuracy of your analysis. Consider the person's cultural background. There are many nuances between the different cultures. Any false assumption can hamper the results. Prevent that from happening by studying various cultures thoroughly and their effects on human behavior. Don't let your personal biases affect your observations. Set your personal biases aside when you are analyzing your target. Regardless of what you personally feel towards the person, you need to ignore that for now and proceed with your analysis objectively. Fudge the numbers. Do not downplay or exaggerate whatever information you get from your target. It is unethical to add non-existing data just so the result will fit your suspicions. Discriminate or stereotype. Although you should consider the other person's culture and nationality when doing your analysis, you should not assume that they fit your perceived stereotype. Keep in mind that a person's cultural heritage only plays a part in a person's behavior. It is not the only determining factor. Misrepresent your findings. You need to present the facts you gathered as truthfully and accurately as possible. You should not lie to yourself. Do not draw connections where there are none just so you can get an answer that fits your biases. Whatever information you get, present them as is. It is easy to fall into the sinister side of dark psychology, so you will need to police yourself as no one else can do it for you. You will need a strong moral compass if you want to use dark psychology, as these methods will not just mess up the person you are using them on, but they could do the same to you. Reading between the lines. Decoding body language. Now it is time to learn and understand the basic techniques used for analyzing people. For this part, we will not be delving too much into dark psychology. Instead, you will be learning how to spot the subtle clues that people unknowingly put out when they are talking with others. Let's start with the first thing that most of us notice: facial expressions. Facial expressions. What your face tells about you. Facial expressions can give you telltale signs of how a person feels. You can just look at their facial expressions to determine whether they are sad, happy, or angry. This is already innate in all human beings. For instance, a smile is an obvious indicator of happiness or joy. Or is it really? Most people believe that they can already tell what other people are feeling, but when faced with someone who has decided on deceiving them, they won't be able to spot anything wrong. For instance, anyone can fake a smile, but only a few can hide what they're truly feeling. With that, you really have to be adept in spotting, detecting, and reading micro-expressions. Fleeting expressions. Catching micro-expressions. Micro-expressions are the small, involuntary facial expressions that people make when they express their emotions. Because they are involuntary moments, most people cannot control them, which means you can use them to spot basic deception. However, some people can train their facial muscles so much that they can greatly minimize their micro-expressions. You need to have a keen eye to spot micro-expressions. They are very subtle, and they typically last less than half a second. If you blink at the wrong time, you might miss them. Reading micro-expressions is an integral part of analyzing people because all humans have them, and they are used to convey the same emotions. These micro-expressions are, therefore, there to help you accurately tell what someone is feeling at a particular moment. Universal micro-expressions. Here are the signs of micro-expressions that you can use to detect emotions in people. Make sure that you are getting more than one micro-expression to confirm the emotion. Just one sign is not enough. Surprised, startled. It is when you are surprised or startled that your micro-expressions are most notable. The main reason is that there is no chance to brace yourself if you get startled. In addition, it takes a while before you can gather yourself after getting surprised, so you will have a bit more time to catch the signs. Here are the signs that you should look for if you suspect surprise. Stretched skin under the brow. Wrinkles appearing across the forehead. Fully opened eyelids. You will also notice the whites of the eyes becoming more visible. Sudden opening of the jaw without tension around the mouth. The eyebrows suddenly go up. One of the reasons why you need to spot genuine surprise is that it is the emotion used the most for deception. When someone gets accused of lying, you will know that it is not true if they show genuine surprise. However, one who is actually lying will feign surprise. Most of the time, they will exaggerate their fake surprise to really sell you into the deception. Fear. Fear is closely related to shock and surprise, meaning there will be a lot of similarities between the two emotions. You may find it challenging to distinguish the two, but with more experience, you can spot the differences. Here are the signs that you should look for if you suspect fear. Open jaw and slightly stretched and tense lips. Wrinkles appearing on the forehead but mostly concentrated in the middle. Open upper eyelids and tensed lower eyelids. The upper whites of the eyes are showing, but the lower parts are still hidden. Raised eyebrows that are also drawn together in a straight line. You need to learn how to differentiate surprise from fear because it can help detect deception. If the person is feigning surprise but you find micro-expressions that express fear, that might mean that you caught the person in the middle of a lie. The micro-expressions associated with fear are some of the hardest to suppress because they are ingrained in our DNA. A human being's fight or flight responses are triggered by fear and they are almost impossible to contain. Sadness. Just like with happiness, it is extremely difficult to feign sadness. The reason is that the micro-expressions for sadness are quite small and fleeting. You might even mistake someone's resting face for sadness. Here are the signs you should look for when you suspect sadness. The inner corners of the eyes are drawn towards the center. A slight pout in the lower lip. The skin underneath the eyebrows forms small triangles. The corners of the lips somewhat point down. Why is it important to identify genuine sadness? Because this emotion is typically used to calm down someone angry. If you are angry at someone who you know is manipulating you, they may feign sadness and gaslight you into doubting yourself. If this happens, check for the micro-expressions and call them out on their deception. However, as said earlier, even though sadness is the hardest emotion to replicate, it is also the most difficult to catch. You will need lots of thorough practice to get the hang of figuring out the micro-expressions for sadness, but it will be worth it if you want to protect yourself from manipulation. Anger. The thing with anger is that it is often hidden. People who are actually angry would try to hide their facial expressions, especially when in public situations. Why do you need to read even the slightest sign of anger? If a person has even slight animosity towards you, it also shows distrust. It may be necessary to persuade them a bit to calm down and gain their trust again. Here are the signs you should look for if you suspect anger. The eyebrows are shifted downward and drawn to the middle of the brows. Vertical wrinkles appear between the brows. Clenched jaw. A mouth is closed and the lips are pressed together. A bit strained lower lip. The eyes are staring hard. Anger is one of the easiest emotions to conceal. The main reason is that it is the most common that human beings experience. Of course, you have already experienced hiding your anger at least once in your life to avoid conflicts. On the other hand, if the anger emotion is too strong and happens fast, the micro-expressions might present themselves suddenly. Why do you need to discover fake anger? Because sociopaths use fake anger and outrage to establish dominance. One dark psychology method is to fake your anger, typically almost immediately at the start of the conversation to make the other more submissive. If you suspect that the other person is not genuinely angry, you can deploy countermeasures to prevent yourself from getting manipulated. Contempt. What is contempt? This is an emotion that is quite similar to hate, and it is the feeling of disrespect or utter dislike towards a person. Also, unlike the other micro-expressions, the ones for contempt are somewhat asymmetrical, meaning only one side of the face is engaged. Here are the signs you should look for when you suspect contempt. One side of the mouth rises briefly. One eyebrow raised. contempt might be mistaken for disgust. But the former is more about feeling superior to someone. If the person feels contempt for you, they feel that they are in the right. So if you see this emotion, you need to tread with caution. Contempt is the most destructive emotion when it comes to relationships. If you notice this with your significant other, use whatever means you can to curb it. If you are having a conversation with someone and they immediately show signs of contempt and then switch to fake happiness, you can be sure that there is some form of manipulation happening. Happiness. Happiness is probably the most faked emotion. Many people would often fake their smiles just so they won't offend or hurt other people's feelings. Note, though, that it does not need an expert to distinguish a fake smile from a genuine one. It may only be challenging and difficult if done by a sociopath. Also, even if you try to fake a smile, there are some micro-expressions that you cannot just do at will. Here are the signs you should look for if you suspect happiness. The lower eyelids might have a couple of wrinkles or might be slightly tensed. Crow's feet at the corners of the eyes. Raised corners of the lips. Slightly raised cheeks. Slightly squinted eyes. You can use your ability to differentiate between fake and real smiles in catching people who are feigning interest and thrill so they can curry trust and then manipulate you later. Disgust. Usually, disgust is triggered whenever you encounter things that are disagreeable to you. Things that smell bad or look disgusting are not the only things that can trigger disgust. You can also feel disgust toward a person. The moment you find the micro-expressions connected to disgust, you immediately need to change your tactics or increase your persuasion to turn the tide in your favor. This also works when you are dating, and you need to find out if you have to step up your game. Here are the signs you should look for if you suspect disgust. Slightly squinted eyes. Raised corners of the nose and wrinkled top of the nose. Slightly raised cheeks. Slightly open mouth, exposing the front teeth. The thing that makes disgust one of the emotions that are hard to suppress is that it makes the feeling even worse. There was a study conducted at the University of Groningen in 2009. Here, the participants had to suppress their disgust after pictures of things that trigger such an emotion were shown to them. What happened is the more the participants tried to contain their disgust, the more their brains actually thought about even more disgusting things. It is like a vicious cycle of disgust. Techniques to find and decode micro-expressions. Focus on the key facial regions. Avoid looking at the whole face. What you should do instead is to focus from one area to another. This is to prevent the other person from sensing what you are doing right away. Focus on facial areas that give you more information, especially the eyes, brows, and mouth. Watch for even the most subtle changes, and then compile the information you can get. Establish a baseline. Before you go through data gathering, you should first establish a baseline. This is so you won't mistake a person's default facial expressions for micro-expressions. Hopefully, the person will be at their default facial expression. However, if they are not, you should manipulate the conversation to a more neutral tone so you can get a baseline. Once you have a baseline, you can easily figure out even the slightest changes. Always take context into consideration. Just reading emotions will not give you that much information. You also need to add context to the emotions. Why does your target seem upset? What did the target find amusing with what you said? Why did your target suddenly get a bit sad when you mentioned something? Practice, practice, and practice some more. You will not get good at catching micro-expressions overnight, so do not try doing it after just learning how to do it. Spend time practicing first and do it only once you are confident of your capabilities. Body postures and hand gestures, literal body language. Now that you've learned about facial expressions, the next step is to learn about how people carry themselves. Most of the time, people's body language betrays their true feelings and motives, so you should be wary of them as well. Just like reading micro-expressions, reading body language can be tricky and you will need to practice quite a lot before you can get good enough to use it practically. Here, you will receive some of the most basic tells to help you get started. How to catch positive body language. Some body language cues will let you know immediately if the intentions of someone are honest. You can also use these tips in determining whether they are trying to use persuasion and manipulation tactics on you. Take note of the eyes. Too much or too little eye contact can give negative implications. You will need to establish what is the right amount of eye contact depending on the person you are analyzing. On average, a normal person would maintain eye contact for 5 to 7 seconds at a time. This clearly indicates their interest in the things you are saying. Also, when they are talking while maintaining just the right amount of eye contact, take it as a sign of honesty. Observe the quality of the handshake. Just like with eye contact, the ideal is a medium handshake strength. The handshake should be sufficiently strong. This signifies that the person has a sense of poise and confidence. A weak handshake is a sign of nervousness or lack of self-confidence. Meanwhile, the reverse, which is a handshake that is kind of strong, indicates aggression, sometimes even power play. However, you need to take into consideration the build of the person when gauging handshakes. A handshake might seem strong to you, but it might be normal for those with a huge muscular build. Check out the posture. Observe the person's posture while they are sitting or standing. If they stand or sit with a straight and direct posture and fill the space as much as they can, it means they are trying to convey power and confidence. The shoulders should be straight, but not stiff. The head is raised, but not so much that they are trying to look down on you. The feet should be sufficiently spread apart, but comfortably. How to catch negative body language. If you spot the following posture cues, you should already put your defenses up and start carefully analyzing the person for any potential threats. Excessive nodding. Too much head nodding can mean that the person wants you to finish whatever you were saying so they can say their rebuttal. It could also mean that they lack confidence and are feeling quite nervous around you. Pair this up with other cues to find out what it really means. Too much eye contact. A liar would typically try to avoid eye contact. Note, though, that there are instances when they will do the opposite to prevent people from catching that they are lying. They may look you in the eye with the hopes of demonstrating their feigned honesty. Too much eye contact could also indicate manipulation. They may try to make you feel uncomfortable by not breaking eye contact. If you are the first one to look away, they will start on a barrage of persuasion techniques to get you to submit even further. Crossed arms and/or legs. Arms or legs crossed may signal disinterest even if the person doing it tries to deliver positive messages. It could be that they are just waiting for the right moment to speak instead of giving their full ears to you as you talk. Crossed arms and legs also subtly indicate a defensive stance. It could be an indication that they are more knowledgeable than you and are in fact waiting for the moment when you can rebuff your belief. If crossed arms are coupled with micro-expressions of contempt, prepare yourself for a bit of gaslighting. Excessive fidgeting. Glance at the person's hands. Do they fidget most of the time? It may demonstrate their lack of interest in the things you are saying. They may not be intently and actively listening to your message, too. If the person is playing with parts of their clothing, like the hems or the buttons, it can also be a sign of disinterest and they are just looking for something to preoccupy themselves. Reading facial expressions and body language is admittedly quite difficult. However, these are the most important steps in analyzing a person because they are used for gathering important data. As mentioned multiple times earlier, do not expect to be good at reading emotions and body language immediately. Practice and perfect the skills first before using it. Doing so prematurely might get you in trouble. However, once you have mastered the techniques to gather all the data you will need, the rest of the human analyzing process will be quite easier in comparison.
I hope you're enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you're feeling about this audiobook in the comments section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, please, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now, let's carry on with the next chapter.
Verbal communication. It's more than just words. There is a high likelihood for you to detect a person's personality just by talking to them. A talk with someone will enlighten you about his personality and even some things he tries to hide from others. In other words, it is possible to sense a person's lies and the reason behind the action by deciphering their words. If you want to have a higher level of accuracy when analyzing people, you have to read between the lines. Do not listen just to the words that come out of the other person's mouth. Check out whether there are subtle nuances you can use in gathering vital information. Learn to listen. The more you hear, the more you know. If you want to analyze a person verbally, you need to be an exemplary listener. Otherwise, you may miss out on several important details, including nonverbal ones. You may miss a couple of important tonal cues while your mind was drifting elsewhere. How can you catch these subtle cues? The answer is by simply being an active listener. Active listening is all about paying close attention to one's message, whether it is conveyed verbally or non-verbally. This means you are not just hearing the words but are also considering the emotions of the speaker and their body language. To become an effective active listener, you should be willing to devote yourself to the task. Improve your attention span too. In addition, you should cultivate an attitude that allows you to empathize with others. Successful active listening is composed of three main components, namely, listening to total meaning. As you listen to someone talk, expect to hear messages conveyed using actual words. This is also often accompanied by the feeling that is underlying the message. An active listener does not just focus on the verbal information conveyed by the other person. You must also take the nonverbal cues into consideration. Responding to the other person's feelings. Once the other person finishes speaking and when a reply is needed, you have to respond to their emotions as well. You should not get into a conversation just so you can argue. Use this chance to gather valuable intel from them. This means you will need to coerce the other to talk as much as possible. This way, the speaker will feel that you truly understand what they meant. This will also establish empathy and a deeper connection. Taking note of all the cues. The nonverbal cues include everything mentioned in the previous chapter. It takes all the verbal and nonverbal cues to get the entire message of the person. In addition, if the message and the nonverbal cues do not seem to match, there is a strong chance of deception. How to become an active listener. Follow these tips and you will immediately become a much better and more active listener than before. However, be diligent in practicing until you start actively listening even without thinking about it. Don't interrupt. You are trying to gather information, not win an argument. So allow someone to speak without any interruption. Listen intently to their words. Even if you want to rebut the other person, hold it in for now. The data that you are gathering is much more important than your ego. Show that you are listening. You need to keep the conversation going as long as possible for optimum data collection. So show the other person that you are listening. Every now and again, give a gentle nod to show that you are still listening. You can also say, "Uh-huh," or "yes," to demonstrate your agreement. Never look at your watch or fidget in your seat as it may indicate boredom and your desire to end the conversation. Clasp your hands together and maintain a sensible amount of eye contact. The more words the other person says, the more data you can accumulate. Do not look away. Have you ever seen psychiatrist meetings in TV shows? Why is it that the patient always lies down while the psychiatrist is sitting on a chair and looking at their notes? This is not usually what happens in a psychiatrist's office, and it should not also be the case when you are talking with someone. Face the person you are talking to, so you can show them how much you are intent on listening to them. Never make the mistake of looking away so you won't end up missing critical nonverbal cues. Don't judge. Speaking of emotions, you should hold your biases and not judge the other person. Avoid jumping to conclusions if data gathering is not yet complete. Even if you strongly disagree with the other person, hold your judgment until you have collected enough information. Judging too early will cloud your judgment, which will make you miss some important cues. Don't plan what you will be saying next. As the conversation continues, avoid thinking too much about what you should say next. Do not muddle your mind with other thoughts unless it is for gathering more data from the other person. Listening while planning what you say next will only confuse you. Don't lose your focus. You should just focus your whole attention on the other person. Do not just listen to the words, but also watch the face for any changes in expressions and any movement from the body. Do you have trouble focusing on their words? Then try to repeat each last word or phrase that they say to you. Ask open-ended questions. Your goal should be to make someone tell you a lot of things. An effective way to make them talk willingly is to ask open-ended questions, those that you cannot answer with just a simple yes or no. By asking such a question, there is a high chance for them to elaborate on their answer, giving you the opportunity to observe them even further. Some examples of open-ended questions include, how did that make you feel? Why do you think that happened to you? Why would you do that? It will take a lot of practice to become a good active listener, but remember this will greatly help when you are analyzing people. Tone and pitch of voice. Deciphering the meaning of sounds. After you've collected enough data from your target through active listening, you can then start to interpret them into usable information. The pitch of the voice. Simply listening to a person's voice will help you get to know them better. You need to carefully observe their tone, pitch, and volume of voice. Is the person saying that they are happy but the tone of their voice seems to say otherwise? If so, there is a chance of deception right there. Inconsistencies in body language. On the other hand, inconsistent tone and body language can also mean that they want to passively try to convey their emotions. In most cases, they are doing this on purpose, like they just want to send their point across in a passive-aggressive manner. If this is the case, maneuver the conversation to let the other person actually say what they mean. The volume of the voice. Is the volume of the person's voice louder than usual? Quieter than usual? There might be something wrong that the other is keeping from you. If they are using a louder voice than usual, they are trying to force their point across by talking over you. Concealed meanings. The hidden meanings behind one's words. More often than not, you should never take anybody's words at face value. Most of the time, the words that come out of a person's mouth have underlying meanings. For instance, if your best friend told you, "You're dating another football player," it might seem like a simple open-ended sentence, but you were actually being lectured on. The "another" implies that your last boyfriend was a footballer. And that did not end well for you. Now, you are dating a footballer again. In this case, you should take note of the exasperation in your friend's voice when they said those words. Also, take the context of the conversation into consideration. In the scenario above, your best friend knew about your previous failed relationship, which is why they are feeling frustrated. Spotting deception. Some of the subtle tells that you should look for when analyzing a person for deception include sudden change in speech patterns. A good indicator that someone is lying is a sudden change in their speech patterns. You must first establish a baseline by asking straightforward questions that they could answer easily. After that, take note of their normal speech patterns. A sudden shift in their speech patterns when asked a difficult question could indicate deception. Sudden changes in the person's voice. For instance, if you are asking someone about their truthfulness and their voice shifted higher, there is a chance of deception. This indicator often comes as a result of being caught off guard, especially if you blurt out a question without them being prepared for it. The sudden change in voice pitch is usually accompanied by shifting their body position. when the person shifts their eyes away when talking. Many assume that avoiding eye contact automatically turns someone into a liar. This is not always the case. It could be that they are still trying to decipher how to correctly and appropriately answer a question. However, if the eye shifting is accompanied by a higher tone and volume of voice, there might be something fishy. Suddenly stopping using I. Psychiatric researchers have found that when people want to distance themselves from their lies, they would typically avoid using the pronoun I when talking about themselves. Usually, they would refer to themselves in the third person to appear more credible and feign honesty. For instance, when one of your friends says, "This guy right here just loves comics," while pointing to themselves, that usually means that they have not read a real comic book in their life. The answers seem too elaborate and detailed. There are times when people know that they need to lie, so they would rehearse their story beforehand. Most of the time, the lies would become too rehearsed. So much so that the liar would insert a lot of unnecessary details into their story. This means you should be wary of stories that seem too practiced and unnatural. The answers seem too short. The opposite of the item above is also true when you are trying to force a liar to give up. There is something called lying by omission, wherein a person would knowingly leave out important details in their statements. Do you want to catch someone delivering their lie? Then try asking for additional details to their original story. Better yet, ask the person to retell their story, but this time in reverse order. Liars would typically trip up their stories when telling these backwards. The reason is that it is much harder to think about the progression of their stories. Can you accurately catch a liar just by their voice? If the person is a bad liar, you can probably figure out their tells and call out the lie. However, an experienced manipulator will be a harder target to crack. It is important to use more than one metric to detect a lie. Collect as much relevant data by being a careful and active listener. Make it a point to ask the appropriate questions, too. Catching verbal cues in the middle of conversations is quite difficult. However, with a lot of practice, you can become an excellent active listener that can catch even the slightest cues from the way a person speaks. Decoding human personalities. For you to use dark psychology when analyzing another person, you need to take in consideration their personality type. By knowing and understanding the personality type of someone who intends to read, you can put to use all the information you gathered about them. You will now be learning about the different human personality types and how to figure out which one any particular person belongs to. Human personalities. What's your personality type? Why do you need to figure out your target's personality? This is actually quite important when you plan on using dark psychology to analyze a person because certain personalities can either be strong against or very susceptible to different techniques. One thing to note about human personality is that it is divided into different sets and types. In this ebook, though, I will use the one that is popular and most commonly used, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI for short. Arguably, the MBTI is the most popular system used for determining a person's personality type. Employers from more than 100 countries use this system for assessing their employees. Many companies use the MBTI system to assess their employees' personalities so they can be placed in departments where they can shine. However, the most common method used for determining a person's MBTI type is by making them take a test, which you will need then to analyze later. This might seem counterintuitive when you are covertly analyzing a person, but there is a way you can make an educated guess. What is MBTI? The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator serves as a very useful tool in determining a person's personality type. After answering a set of questions, you will be assigned 4 letters taken from a pool of 8, namely E, extroversion, or I, introversion, S, sensing, or N, intuition, T, thinking, or F, feeling, J, judging, or P, perceiving. This test will assign you with 1 out of 16 possible outcomes that will then give you a simplified interpretation of your personality type. How to identify someone's MBTI type. Have you made the decision to analyze someone? Then remember how important it is to work not only quickly, but also efficiently, since there is only a limited time for this. The following method only involves looking for 6 clues, and you can likely get them within the average time spent having a conversation. Note, you will be seeing a lot of different iterations of the letters mentioned above, so it's best that you memorize their meanings, or at least have a cheat sheet handy when you are studying the different personalities. Don't worry, you'll get the hang of these letters in no time. Here are the clues that you need to look for. Starting the conversation. The first clue that you need to look for when you are trying to guess a person's personality type is if they are the one who starts the conversation. Either the person takes charge of the conversation or they let you do most of the talking. As you talk to complete strangers, it is possible to detect their introversion or extroversion based on how willing they are to talk with you. Extroverts, for instance, are usually the ones who strike up conversations even with strangers. They are also more eager to talk when someone they are unfamiliar with talks with them. Meanwhile, an indicator of the introverted personality is their tendency to speak only with those they know. It is also possible for them to talk if someone they know properly introduced them first. To guess one's personality just by observing the way they speak, you need to go at the beginning of the interaction. Observe how the person behaves at the start of your conversation. There is a possibility that you are dealing with an extrovert if they know how to talk comfortably and confidently. Going further into the conversation. You can find even more information about the other person's personality the deeper you get into the conversation. You can get the gist of their personality based on how they respond to your attempts to control the conversation. A few personality types have this tendency of avoiding topics and subject matters that cause them discomfort or do not stir their interest. People with INTP, introversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving, personalities typically avoid talking about abstract things like their feelings and emotions. On the other hand, people with intuitive feeling personalities like ENFJ, extroversion, intuition, feeling, judging, and INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging types tend to go deep in any conversation. They would maneuver past the small talk and just dive straight into the more meaningful subjects. INTJ, introversion, intuition, thinking, judging, and ENTJ, extroversion, intuition, thinking, judging, personalities, on the other hand, prefer having deep and complex conversations. They particularly enjoy discussing academic topics, and they also like partaking in debates. Observe closely where your conversation goes and the specific topics you tackled. That way, you will most likely uncover one's personality type, or at least a part of it. Discussing personal details. Although listening and observing your target is important, asking questions is also just as significant. During the entire conversation, ask a few personal questions to get to know your target deeply. Try learning more about others, and you will also get a sense of their personality in general. Ask about their hobbies or their interests. You can pick up a lot of data about someone's personality just by knowing what they like to do in their experiences. For instance, ESTP, extroversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving, people are thrill seekers. They also love talking about their latest and greatest exploits. On the other hand, if you feel radiance, empathy, and intelligence from the person, it is likely that they have an ESFJ, extroversion, sensing, feeling, judging personality. Those who have this type of personality tend to talk about their humanitarian ventures and acts of charity. You can feel that being a contributing part of society means a lot to them. Ask the person some personal questions. Whether they answer or not, you will still be getting a lot of data regarding their personality. Decoding body language. Aside from verbal cues, you can also gauge an individual's personality by reading into their body language. This means you have to learn how to differentiate the body languages shown by extroverts and introverts. For instance, It is common knowledge that social settings and functions are not that compatible with introverts. Introverts may pull their shoulders in while orienting their bodies to point away from people during conversations. They do not also like physical contact. You can usually tell who the introverts are in a public setting because they are usually the ones with crossed arms who also put some space or boundaries between them and others. Also, they typically can't make direct eye contact last long. They break it quickly by turning their gaze to the right. Extroverts are almost the polar opposites of introverts. When having a conversation, they face the other person directly. They have expressive faces and they also like using different hand gestures to state their point. You can tell who the extroverts are at a party. They are often the chatty ones who are comfortable approaching other people and opening up conversations. Extroverts are also capable of holding eye contact much longer than introverts. When they do break contact, they usually look to their left. ISTJ, ISFJ, ESTJ, and ESFJ body language cues. People with SJ, sensing judging personalities, typically have exemplary body postures. They sit and stand straight with their shoulders pulled back. Their movements usually come with a purpose. They have this sense of clarity that makes them fully aware of where they intend to go. They are also very determined to get into their desired destination quickly. There are even instances when their intent to focus on their destination and the things they do causes them to ignore what is happening in the now. When they often walk straight toward their target and will not meander unless they are trying to enjoy a talk with a companion. People who have ISTJ, introversion, sensing, thinking, judging, or ISFJ, introversion, sensing, feeling, judging personalities with a dominant introverted sensing, SI, typically have a focused gaze. This means they are less likely to look elsewhere when they are having a discussion. ISTJ and ESTJ, extroversion, sensing, thinking, judging personality types, according to researchers, have stiff upper lips when they are talking. They also make brief and subtle movements when talking with someone, usually quick nods and hand gestures. On the other hand, people with SFJ, sensing, feeling, judging personality types, ISFJ and ESFJ, tend to make elongated and more fluid movements. In addition, they have more animated facial expressions and exude warmth. They would use gentle hand gestures as a means of demonstrating their empathy. However, there are times when SFJ types would shift from being FE type, extroverted and feeling, to TI type, introverted and thinking, and vice versa. Once they get into their TI phase, they become stoic and hard to read. ISTP, ISFP, ESTP, and ESFP body language cues. Probably the first thing that you will observe in people with SP, sensing perceiving, personalities is that they appear easygoing. However, they are also quite attentive. Sensing perceivers are often vigilant of their surroundings but would nonetheless still prefer enjoying themselves. These personality types often possess the most impressive body awareness among the 16 MBTI personalities. They are also quite wary of everything that they do and its connection to other things. Even though they have long and fluid movements, they rarely bump into people and things, nor would they unsee their intended destination. ESFP, extroversion, sensing, feeling, perceiving, and ESTP, extroversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving, people commonly have quite loud body language and would often use hand gestures when they are talking. Once they start talking, you will be able to sense their feelings and emotions right away. You can detect that through their voice, facial expressions, and body language. However, once they start to analyze something, it is like a switch flipped in their heads, and they suddenly become very stoic and unreadable. If they are in deep thoughts, ESTP and ESFPs would usually look down and almost all expressions would drain out of them. INTJ, INFJ, ENTJ, and ENFJ body language cues. Those who have an NJ, intuition, judging, personality type usually look like they are always focused. For instance, INTJ, introversion, intuition, thinking, judging, or INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging, personality types often look like they are unaware of their surroundings when they are searching for hidden answers. However, it is also typical for NJ personality types to let their eyes drift down and to the side when they are thinking. NJ personality types would usually alternate between staring intently at those whom they decided to talk to and then gazing down in every conversation. This is especially evident if they are discussing serious matters. Those with NJ personality types are often more unaware of the things going on and around them compared to the sensing types. You can expect them to see the world as a place full of various concepts where they can let their imaginations run wild, so they are not particularly keen when it comes to noticing details. This is why they are more prone to tripping and hitting tables' edges and doorways. Some of them can train themselves to overcome such weaknesses, though it takes a lot of practice. ENFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging, and INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging types, due to them using extroverted feeling, FE, their emotions tend to leak out more when they are talking. They also have livelier and more animated facial expressions compared to the INTJ and ENTJ, extroversion, intuition, feeling, judging types. In addition, they move their hands in a more fluid motion. However, just like the SP personalities, they would suddenly turn quiet and stoic when they are trying to analyze something. INTP, INFP, ENTP, and ENFP body language cues. People who have NP, intuition perceiving personality types, use extroverted intuition, NE thought processes. Expect their eyes to shift from one side to another if they are on the stage of gathering ideas. They may appear as if they are searching for something. However, the reality is that they tend to scour their minds to find reliable answers and ideas. Just like the other intuition personality types, those with NP personalities have little awareness of their surroundings. They would usually bump into things, especially when they are walking while thinking about something. ENFP, extroversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving, and ENTP, extroversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving personalities are often lively and very expressive of their emotions when talking. However, they do become quite stoic when thinking. An ENFP type would turn every quiet and reserved when thinking deep, while an ENTP type would still have expressive eyes. On the other hand, INFP, introversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving, and INTP, introversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving types tend to be more reserved and display a closed or defensive posture when they are thinking. This means they are somewhat skilled in putting some boundaries to prevent people from reading them. The person's attention span. You can also get a grasp of what kind of personality a person has through their attention span when you are having a conversation. In addition, this is easier compared to analyzing body language because you only have two categories: people who listen and those who don't. As you can see, one's behaviors tend to differ depending on the setting. For instance, their behavior will be different if they are just talking to one person than when they are facing a large crowd or group. Observe how your target behaves when you are both at a party or attending a large social event. Take note of how they react to the other people in the group. Are they listening to the conversations? If the person is quite talkative, expressive, and always seems to be the center of attention in any group, then they might be an ESFP type. They are usually the ones that look fidgety and uncomfortable if you talk to them personally. It would seem like they would rather be somewhere else having fun. These personality types love having conversations with a large group in the middle of the room rather than an intimate chat in a quiet corner. Figuring out the person's inclination to manipulation and persuasion. Obviously, you won't feel good upon learning that you are being manipulated to do something unwillingly. The problem is that there are specific personality types that are more prone to getting manipulated than the others. To learn if someone is prone to manipulation and persuasion, you should study the many personality types and how vulnerable they are to fall victim to dark psychology. INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging. In most cases, INFJ personalities are typically great judges of character. They are capable of telling whether someone is worth trusting. When one tries to manipulate them, alarm bells would immediately sound in their brains. INFJ people are always quite skeptical of those they don't know. The main reason is that they have seen that most people are not that trustworthy. Do you wish to analyze someone with this particular personality? Then do it very discreetly since they can easily detect and sense it. ENFJ. Extroversion, intuition, feeling, judging. An ENFJ person is great at reading other motives and they can definitely tell when someone is trying to sway their opinions. As such, ENFJ personalities, even though they are extroverted, dislike being around those whom they deem as not worthy of their trust. However, ENFJ personality types are loving and genuine to those whom they trust, which is why they seemed like easy targets for manipulation. If you will be analyzing someone with an ENFJ personality, do it discreetly and gradually. Otherwise, they will catch what you are doing and put up their defenses. INFP. Introversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving. Younger people with INFP personalities are quite susceptible to manipulation. An INFP person is warm and empathetic, which makes them vulnerable to various forms of manipulation and deceit. They often look for the good in others, which gives them tunnel vision when it comes to spotting the bad. However, as they mature, INFPs will develop thicker skin against manipulation as they tend to learn quickly from their experiences. Analyzing a mature INF person is still very much possible. Note, though, that manipulating them is kind of tricky and challenging. ENFP. Extroversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving. An ENFP is one of the most gullible and susceptible to manipulation. However, they are also natural manipulators themselves. They have this convincing prowess, which means they can persuade or convince people to act based on their intentions. The good news is that they do not often do this for a long time. They only usually do it in jest. If an ENFP notices that you are manipulating them, they can easily turn the tables on you. INTJ. Introversion, intuition, thinking, judging. People with INTJ personalities are among the most difficult to manipulate because they are adept at sensing when people have negative motivations toward them. They have good decision-making skills. They are fond of making decisions independently and without the pressure of others. With that, you should be ready to provide them with plenty of information if you wish them to listen to you. An INTJ personality will actively avoid you if they catch you trying to read and/or manipulate them. They might even cut you out of their lives completely. People with an INTJ personality are naturally skeptical and will automatically set their defenses up when approached by someone they do not know. If you are trying to analyze someone with this personality, be very careful and deliberate with your actions. ENTJ. Extroversion, intuition, thinking, judging. An ENTJ personality type is not easy to manipulate and/or analyze. They are some of the most skeptical people and are quite observant. They would rarely put their defenses down and will always closely watch people whom they do not know that well. They prefer hanging out with those they can trust, so getting close to an ENTJ type will be difficult. INTP. Introversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving. INTP personalities are also quite skeptical of strangers, making them difficult to manipulate and analyze. They are always doubtful of people and expect those around them to take advantage of them. You will have a hard time trying to make an INTP believe in what you are saying as they do their own research rather than take your word. INTP personality types are naturally mistrusting simply because they do not like the feeling of being manipulated. ENTP. Extroversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving. You need to be careful when you encounter an ENTP personality because they are particularly good at uncovering and avoiding deception. This personality type is especially adept at detecting manipulation. They are also naturally skilled at using it. In other words, if you do not exercise caution and proper vigilance, you may end up being manipulated instead, without you being aware of it. If you deduce that your target has an ENTP personality, tread very carefully or avoid it altogether if your defenses against manipulation are not that strong yet. ISTJ. Introversion, sensing, thinking, judging. A person with an INTJ personality is also very skeptical about people they do not know well, which makes them extremely difficult to analyze and manipulate. Just like the INTP types, ISTJs are always doubtful and will always have their defenses up when interacting with others. An ISTJ person is very independent and they prefer to make their own decisions. They dislike others making their own choices for them, and they would rather avoid anyone who would dare even try. ESTJ. Introversion, sensing, thinking, judging. Analyzing or manipulating an ESTJ personality will not be easy because they can smell a manipulator from a mile away and would actively avoid them. ESTJ types are very skeptical and they dislike it when others forcefully make them change their minds about their choices. However, when they get close to an ESTJ type and gain their trust, it will be easier for them to put down their guard. ISFJ. Introversion, sensing, feeling, judging. The ISFJ consists of people who are loving and caring, making them quite susceptible to manipulation. You can even say that the ISFJs are too trusting for their own good. They put the needs of their loved ones first before their own, making them ideal targets of manipulative people, especially the ones who manage to infiltrate their social circles. They can sometimes be skeptical, but they are too empathetic that when someone fakes emotions, they would usually cave. ESFJ. Extroversion, sensing, feeling, judging. Persons with an ESFJ personality are quite good at reading emotions, which means they can usually tell if someone is worthy of their trust. Unlike the ISFJ types, those with ESFJ personalities do not fall that easily for fake emotions. They are also rarely swayed by tactics depending on emotions. However, if an ESFJ type happens to make a somewhat deep emotional connection with someone, it is possible to sway them easily. When you are analyzing someone with an ESFJ personality, you better keep your emotions in check as they can serve as massive red flags. Attempt to make a connection first before analyzing an ESFJ type. ISTP. Introversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving. One of the biggest reasons why an ISTP type is not that easy to analyze and manipulate is that they would rather spend time alone than with other people. Not only that, they are also naturally skeptical and dubious of everyone around them. Expect them to avoid interacting with those they can't seem to trust. An ISTP type of personality does not want to be in the presence of dishonest individuals. They can easily tell if one does not have good intentions toward them, and rather than arguing, they would rather just avoid people altogether. You will need to pass through difficult hurdles when you want to analyze this personality, so make sure that all your effort will be worth all the trouble you will be going through. ESTP. Extroversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving. Those with the ESTP personality type are generally independent, but sometimes they will have a hard time when a loved one is manipulating them. However, they always seem to have their guard up when it comes to talking to strangers, so you cannot expect to analyze them effectively right after you just met. You might also want to tread lightly as an ESTP will likely sense even the slightest sign of manipulation. ISFP. Introversion, sensing, feeling, perceiving. ISFP personality types are typically warm and welcoming, which makes them ideal targets for manipulation. They would actively try to avoid manipulative people, but they are often taken advantage of by the few who manage to slip through their defenses. This means that if they are manipulated by a loved one or anyone who is close to them, it would be hard for them to call them out even if they are aware of what is being done to them. They are sometimes much too gentle for their own good. ESFP. Extroversion, sensing, feeling, perceiving. An ESFP personality, just like the ISFP, is easy to manipulate by people whom they are close to. They won't even notice it. Those with EFP personalities tend to take things at face value. They would believe anything if someone within their inner circle says it. ESFPs are also laid back and relaxed. They don't like getting caught up in the negatives of life, which is why they are not as skeptical as the other personality types. Do keep in mind that although people's personalities are categorized into 16 different types here, that does not mean you can expect two people of the same type to behave in exactly the same way. The personalities discussed in this chapter are only generalizations. They are meant for use as a guide when you are analyzing a person. The MBTI system is not an exact science, but it can be a helpful guide to get a general read on someone. This just means that even though you manage to determine one's personality type, always leave room for variations in behavior. Exploring and understanding motivations. What exactly drives you? Why is the purpose for everything that you do? What inspired and motivated you to become the person you are now? What are you striving for? These are the kinds of data that you will have to collect to determine what specifically motivates and drives someone. This is where you have to combine all information you collected to make or draw a sensible conclusion. By knowing a person's motivators, you can use something that will help you in swaying interactions based on your preferred direction. This means you can use their motivators in persuading or manipulating them to do anything you want. You can also implant your own motivations if you manage to crack their defenses. Note, though, a vital function of human analysis is to analyze whether someone has good or bad intentions. You will also know if they intend to manipulate you. In this case, you are finding a person's motivations to protect yourself and the people around you. Do take note that you may not be able to find out one's exact motivation, but you can at least get the gist of what they want to happen. In any case, you will be getting enough information to defend yourself and retaliate if needed. Finding a person's motivation. It is kind of tricky and challenging to identify one's motives. Expect the process to become even more difficult if you want to make sure that they can't detect what you are doing. Do you suspect the real motive of someone who interacts with you? Then find out if they are showing the following. Looks like you are the focus of the conversation. In reality, though, they are not focusing on you. As you might already know, a manipulative person will feign interest to get you to lower your guard. They may even start asking personal questions. However, you notice that every now and then, the focus goes to them again. This should make you doubt their intentions. It could be that they intend to manipulate you or they are hiding their real motives. While talking to you, it is also possible that they are looking for ways to sway your opinion. At first, they will look like they are agreeing with your point, but this is a ploy to make you lower your guard, thus making you easier to persuade. When you lower your guard, that is when they will hook you into siding with them. They repeat themselves. Listen carefully to what they are saying. If you notice repetitive suggestions or advice, you may start doubting their motives. During a normal conversation, more details are included in the discussion, and additional context is introduced. This may prompt both parties to have a change in opinions. A healthy discourse often results in finding a mutually beneficial common ground. Meanwhile, if you are with someone who is generally manipulative, expect them to reiterate or repeat the idea they have originally presented. They do it even if you also try to add more context or information to the conversation. They will repeat their desired outcome until you are convinced, or at least until you have gotten tired and just agree to what they want. If you notice that the other person is just restating their original idea and has no intention of being convinced to the contrary, that is a sign that there is only one acceptable outcome for them. That is a red flag already because the other person is not interested in the discussion. They are indoctrinating you. They are never around when you need them. A sure sign of a manipulative person is that you are always on top of their mind when they need you. The problem is if it is you who is going to need their help, they will suddenly become inaccessible and unapproachable. This inconsistency is a sure red flag that you are dealing with someone whom you should not be. What's worse? Once you confront them, it would be as if they are a victim and you are the bad guy. They will then bully you because you let them down when they needed you. In most cases, they do this to make you feel guilty, thereby more susceptible to persuasion and manipulation. Fair-weather friends are toxic and they are worthy of suspicion. If you notice this in a person, it is best to cut ties with them as your friendship is clearly not genuine. You are only a friend when they need something from you. They exaggerate. As Queen Gertrude said, "The lady doth protest to much, methinks." This is a line in Hamlet by William Shakespeare, and it happened when Queen Gertrude responded to the rather not genuine overacting of an actress in a play made by Prince Hamlet to prove that his uncle is guilty for his father's murder. You can also apply this line in case you detect or sense someone who tries to control or manipulate you. Have you met someone who tries to overreact or display too much feelings or emotions than required? Then they are indicators that they are distracting you. They are manipulating you to focus on other things instead of what is truly happening. Manipulative people use overacting to interrupt your chain of thought and possibly startle you when they sense that you are starting to doubt their intentions. This is a tactic used by manipulators to steer you into making their feelings the focus of the conversation. This can also be used by unscrupulous people to effectively shut you down when they feel like they are losing the argument. The moment that the conversation becomes uncomfortable for them, they would raise their voice and dial up their emotions to make you back off. If your gut senses that something is wrong, you may instinctively feel like something is wrong as you continue to talk to someone. Then it could be your subconscious telling you that someone tries to control or manipulate you by making you do or believe something that you do not agree with. Ask yourself, why am I feeling uncomfortable? Is there something that this person is doing that's making me feel this way? If there is something inside you that is telling you to doubt the validity of the words that come out of someone's mouth, then that is your internal lie detector sounding the alarm. It can be quite accurate most of the time. You can sense the desperation in their voice. You can naturally sense an oversell when you see it, like a salesman who really needs another sale to hit their quota. You can sense the desperation in other people's voices quite easily. Initially, the one who is attempting to manipulate you might seem calm. However, once they notice that you are not falling into the trap, they will start to sound desperate. However, the opposite might also happen. The person might seem overbearing at first, but will then switch to a calm voice to try and convince you to believe them. Both scenarios reek of desperation. The situation feels familiar. Can you remember someone telling you the things you hear from the person in front of you right now? What are their real intentions? Does your gut make you look back at an instance when your present conversation seems to be the same as the one before? If your answer is yes, try to recall what transpired at that time. Alternatively, you can also ask yourself, what has this person done in the past to warrant myself feeling doubtful of them today? Search through your memories and past experiences for context and precedence. This will give your doubts even more strength and make you more determined to go with your gut feel. Can you ask the person directly what their motives are? Though it looks counterintuitive, you still have the option to ask someone of their real and true motives. Be discreet when doing so, though. Avoid approaching someone for this with a more confrontational stance. For instance, if you are doubting another person's motivation for helping you out of the blue, you can tell them, "Thanks a lot for helping me earlier, but may I ask why did you do that?" Don't be confrontational. It would be better to have a conversation by asking about their expected outcome. Whatever they say and the tone of their voice when saying it will serve as your indicators in determining their intentions. Regardless if the person is lying or telling the truth, you can somehow get a general idea of the person's motives based on their answer to your simple question. It is quite hard to identify someone's motivations. The challenges may worsen, especially if you consider the fact that you can't expect everyone to know about their motivations. Still, the secret to figuring out a person's motivation is to just keep it simple. Find out if their intentions toward you are good or bad. You need such information in analyzing humans to ensure that you get to protect yourself all the time. Practical applications. Using NLP to get your desired results. Finally, you are now at the point where you can put everything you learned into practice. Do take note that you have only learned about the basics of human analysis, so you should not take risks that are too big for your current skills. Commit to practicing the different techniques for analyzing people often, so you will become an expert sooner or later. Improving personal relationships. A perfect relationship is non-existent. No matter how hard you try, there will still be instances when people in a relationship, romantic or otherwise, will encounter issues and conflicts. The problem comes with the conflicts come too often and last longer than necessary. You can use the things you learned thus far to improve your personal relationships, but not necessarily to the extent that you will be manipulating other people. Do you have family problems? Then make sure to talk through these issues. However, before having a conversation, it is better to gauge the other person's emotional state. Analyze the other person. Check if the other person is in an irritable emotional state and see if they seem to be receptive or defensive. It would be best to initiate the talk once they calm down. You can also use your skills at detecting micro-expressions to gauge the mood during the conversation. Upon sensing the initial symptoms of mood changes, including widened eyes and flaring nostrils, work on de-escalating the situation. NLP may also be used in building rapport and establishing a deeper connection. For instance, you can use mirroring to match the other person's mental state and make them more receptive to your suggestions. Breaking down group behavior. What is group behavior? Group behavior is the cumulative actions, interactions, and attitudes shown by individuals when they are part of a collective or group. This covers the behaviors that appear when different personalities get together to work towards a common goal or a mutual purpose. Not all group behavior is the same. They can range from harmonious and cooperative to being full of conflict and power struggles. They are also unique group behaviors that lead to the members feeling a sense of belonging in the group, which feeds into their basic needs. This means that the group can also become an integral part of their entire being. Why do you need to read group behavior? By now, you may have already gained plenty of knowledge about reading a person like a book. This should prompt you to begin using your newly developed skill to determine the way through which specific groups operate. You will also get an idea about the problems they are presently experiencing. But why do you need to know how a group operates? If you are a member of the group, figuring out group behavior will help improve collaboration between members, improve individual decision-making, improve leadership and management, make conflict resolution easier. Are you not a group member yet, but you wish to participate? Then take time observing the group. This should help you determine its hierarchy, the politics within it, and the way to position yourself to get inside it. You can even make it so that you can rise within the ranks. How do you read group behavior? Now, it is time to put into good use the things you learned from the past chapters. Do you wish to be a member of a certain group? Then learn how you should act and whom you should approach. Here you can put your analysis skills to good use. Closely observe the expressions and body language of the members of the group. Take note if the emotions they put out differ from when they are with other members compared to their behavior when by themselves. This can help you identify if there are any conflicts within the ranks or if there is growing animosity. You also need to check the personalities of the members. Do the members of the group share or at least have the same personality types? In any setting, groups should at least have slightly diverse personalities because if everyone shares too many personalities, conflicts typically arise. This particular information is also useful in checking your suitability and compatibility within the group and how much you desire to be a member. Human analysis also helps in checking the hierarchy of the members of the group. You can use your new skill at reading body language to figure out who are the leaders and the lower rungs of the power ladder. Note that even if you belong to a group, at least one will become the member looked up by others in case they need guidance, especially in decision-making. This particular knowledge will give you a clear idea on who you should approach in case you really wish to join. Power play. Figuring out who is in charge. Do you really need to know who is in charge? The answer is yes. But why? It is simple. By knowing who is in charge, it will be easier to gain full control of the entire group. For instance, if you wish the group to accept you, the only one you have to really convince is the leader. That way you can go inside. Whatever the leader decides, the other members will most likely agree. How do you identify the leader of the group? Take time to observe every person in a room. Check the body language and expressions of people. Who are the ones that are exhibiting submissive behavioral cues? In most cases, they are the ones with lowered hands, hunched shoulders, or those who remain seated while the dominant personalities are talking to them. Once you identify the submissive ones, observe how they behave with others. If they show more submissive body language and facial expressions with a particular person, that one is the leader or the dominant personality in the room. This is the one with whom you need to curry favor to gain access to the group. Reading the room. Reading the room means you are gauging the emotions of the group. Why do you need to do this? Here are some primary reasons. Helps you become more effective at communicating. Improves business dealings. Builds rapport with more people. Promotes better engagement during public speeches. Prevents conflicts. When you are reading the room, what you are essentially doing is a quick scan of all participants' body language and emotions. Pay attention to the subtle cues that indicate the following. Attentiveness. You will, of course, want to know if your audience is paying attention. It would be hard for you to present your point if you don't capture the interest of your audience. Do a quick scan for body language cues, like fidgeting, yawning, gazing out the window, multitasking, checking their watches or phones, and more. Engagement. This will give you a bead on your audience's interest level. Some people may feign attention just to avoid offending you, but they will have a hard time faking engagement. To tell whether someone is really interested and is paying attention, find out whether they do things, like taking notes, avoiding questions, or fixing or correcting mistakes. Sentiment. This is how you are making your audience feel. Look closely at the emotions they are putting on display. This is where you can sense who agrees or disagrees with you. You can also use body language analysis to figure out if your audience is experiencing discomfort, either from the topic you are discussing or environmental factors. Reading the room will take a lot of practice, especially for reading nonverbal cues from your audience. Once you master this, though, you will notice a major improvement in your communication and leadership skills. You will also be able to increase your charisma. All these skills combined are crucial in persuading the whole group with ease. Neuro-linguistic programming. Like-minded control, except it isn't. Observing people's body language and nonverbal cues are great, but how do you use them? Once you have collected information and cues, you can start using neuro-linguistic programming. This is said to be effective in influencing others to do things in accordance to your expectations and wishes. What is NLP? Without going through too many specifics, neuro-linguistic programming is a psychological approach involving analyzing strategies and applying the thoughts and behavior of people, and then applying techniques to reach a specific goal or target. In general, it involves guiding someone subtly so they will perform certain things. Expect them to do it without getting alerted to the fact. This means you will be taking all the information that you gained from your observations and analysis and then coming up with a strategy to use to persuade a person or group towards your intended goal. Common NLP techniques. There are lots of NLP techniques, but we will focus mainly on the ones used more commonly and whose concepts are easier to grasp. Using a person's motivations against them. Once you manage to determine a person's motivations, you can use that to persuade them to do what you want, essentially. For instance, let's say you were planning to sell your car and you have already received some inquiries. You can use your skills to persuade someone to finally decide to buy it. You can use your observations and analysis to find out what the person's motivations are. Engage in a light conversation and take note of all the cues they put out. If they briefly mention that they have a young child, you can casually mention the safety rating of your vehicle and that you bought it because there is more than enough room in the back seat for a rear-facing child seat. The other person may not notice it, but you just used their connection with their young child to trigger emotions within them, and that you have successfully planted the idea that your car is great for families. Restricting choices. In the NLP scene, this is called embedded commands. Restricting choices is when you ask the other person a seemingly innocent question, but the truth is that you limited the number of possible answers. This technique gives the other person the illusion of choice when you already made the decision and that you were only persuading them to agree with you. For instance, let's say you went out with a group of your friends for dinner. You then asked the group, "What do you guys want to eat? Chicken or fish?" You see what you did there? Your friends that you are asking them where they want to eat, but they haven't noticed that you limited the options to just 2. This can make you an effective leader because you led the group into an acceptable decision that everyone agreed upon without that much effort. Using hierarchy values. Let's go back to the motivations of people. When you are looking for a person's motives, you will actually uncover their needs. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological needs are the most important, followed by safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem, and finally, self-actualization. By determining the exact motivation of someone and finding its rank in the hierarchy, this information will be useful in terms of persuading them to do something. For instance, let's say you were in a club but suddenly the bouncer asks you to step outside for purportedly breaking a rule. However, it is unclear what type of rule you broke. You can deduce that the motive or need of the bouncer at the time is to get your compliance, which falls under the self-esteem tier of the hierarchy. Before that need is achieved, the tiers below it need to be satisfied first. You can start with the safety and security stage. Show the bouncer that you don't want any trouble and show no aggression. This will assure the bouncer that you are not a threat to his or other people's safety. This will give him a reason to trust you and actually listen. With that, you will gain an opening, which will let you present your ideas to him that will most likely persuade him that you can stay. Mirroring. This is when you observe the other's body language and then copy it. When it is your turn to talk, subtly repeat the other's gestures and tone of voice while you speak. This can help you establish a sense of familiarity and rapport between the two parties. For instance, when you notice the other likes to use hand gestures quite a bit, you can try to mimic their actions when you are the one talking. However, it should be done subtly and unnoticeably. Do the same hand gestures but slightly, and just elevate your hands up a bit to waist level. Once the other person is feeling comfortable in your conversation, you can then introduce slight changes until the other is mirroring you. This will allow you to guide the other to do whatever you like. Creating positive connections. This is the process of creating associations between positive emotions and a particular trigger. For instance, you can somewhat train a person to instantly feel positive by tapping their shoulder as you give them praise whenever they do a great job. Do this enough times, and they will associate that tap on the shoulder with a positive emotion. That way, they will feel compelled to smile and feel positive every time. Conclusion. The process of analyzing people can be a tough and tricky process, especially if you haven't done it before. You have to monitor a lot of things. These include subtle body language, tone of voice, emotions, and any other subtle details that will help you read and analyze someone. Just simply taking note of the body language and facial expressions of someone is usually enough to learn more about them. Details like their current emotional state, behavior, personality, and even their motivation should also be scrutinized. Hopefully, this book helped you learn and understand how you can analyze people using the information you collected about them. You may even find this knowledge useful in persuading or manipulating people. Now that you know how to analyze people, you have to commit to using this ability wisely and responsibly. Never use it irresponsibly and for the bad of others. As much as possible, use the tips and techniques for analyzing people that you have learned here only when it is really necessary. Introduction. Do you want to possess the ability to decode body language? Why do you think you need to study and learn body language and signals? Is being an expert in body language a really great skill to have? One skill that many people would like to harness is decoding body language. You may think that taking people's words at face value is fine, but doing so may only cause you to miss the bulk and essence of the message. By mastering body language, it will be easier for you to get and understand the whole message and determine if the person talking to you is truthful. By having a great understanding of body language, you also get the chance to communicate with pure intent. It is a quick way to establish connection and trust. Let's say, for example, you met someone for the first time. You can quickly detect their trustworthiness by looking at and observing their body language. The reason is that you can read their intent and control your own response using body language and cues. With that ability, you will be more effective in communicating. If you have no idea how to read and decode body language, don't worry. The entire process just involves mastering some basic concepts. With your knowledge in decoding and reading body language, you can improve your communication skills. You can also use it in improving your leadership skills and relationships. In addition, you can control your body language and use it to convey your messages more effectively. This skill also serves as your protection against deception, persuasion, and manipulation by those using dark psychology. If you are genuinely interested in learning and understanding everything about decoding body language, then this book will serve as your ultimate guide. It will teach you all the things that you have to learn about reading people's body language correctly. Upon learning the basics, you can start practicing and commit to really harnessing this skill. Sooner or later, you can see yourself as a master in reading and decoding body language. Let's start. Understanding body language. Hello and welcome. You grabbed a copy of this book because of your interest in body language and how to decode it. If you have heard about body language but you haven't done any real in-depth studying about the subject, it is highly recommended that you do. By gaining knowledge about body language and its benefits, you will feel more inspired to master it. What is body language? Every time you talk to someone, do you tend to take their words literally? Do you not suspect if there are instances when they are lying to you and actively manipulating you? Sorry if the last part scared you, but it is a possible scenario. Note that even simple talks may end up turning into a way for those around you to manipulate or use you. Body language is the part of communication that, even if unspoken, can reveal a true person's true emotions and motives. It can also make every message a lot more impactful. This means that communication is more than just the words shared between individuals. It is also possible to communicate through nonverbal cues, like body postures, tone of voice, and hand gestures, that all make up body language. One example of simple body language is a relaxed facial expression that suddenly bursts into a wide grin with eyes squinting slightly. Those are the signs of someone being genuinely happy. Body language can also be your hands flailing to signify exasperation. The signs can also be quite subtle, like crossed arms, to signify being defensive. Despite seeing the cues or signs, you are unsure of their real meaning. Note, though, that upon seeing the body language cues, it is highly likely for your body to react or respond to them instinctively. You may even do it unconsciously. In hindsight, you have also been using body language to influence others unconsciously. It is so powerful, but what is even more so is learning how to read it. Why does body language matter? Now that you got the gist of body language, let's start discussing why it is so important when you are communicating with an individual or a group. Let's talk about chimps, for instance. While they are wild animals, they are not mindless. Chimps live in groups and they communicate by using their own forms of body language and other nonverbal cues. This is true for other animals who are incapable of speaking. Despite not being able to speak, they can still deliver their message through body language. On the other hand, humans naturally have the ability to talk and speak. However, they still depend on and use body language to make them more effective in delivering their message. For instance, if you utilize positive body language when meeting with a group of people whom you don't know, you will be sending messages that you are approachable, nice, and open to learning new things. In addition, human beings naturally use their body language whenever they are communicating along with their words. For instance, if a person is going into a business deal or negotiation, their body language will show their confidence and commitment. A person's body language plays an integral role in serious interactions as it can show the other party just how committed they are to the conversation. Body language also affects how you present yourself to others, whether it is for a job interview or a casual meet-up with your friends. This is also applicable during first dates. In that case, you may want to display your endearing and positive traits through body language. It could also be something that you do unconsciously. However, there are also instances when you are conscious about the effect of your body language on how others interpret your message. For example, if you consciously correct your posture, you can show someone that you pay close attention to them. It also indicates how focused you are on the things they are telling you. Meanwhile, if the speaker displays negative body language, you may reciprocate it with a loss of interest in the message being delivered to you. In addition, if the speaker is presenting important information, the audience will not perceive it as such if the speaker is giving off the wrong vibes. The science behind body language. Even before the first semblance of language came to the earth, body language has already been widely used. Prehistoric humans did not know how to communicate using words, so they needed to rely on nonverbal cues to talk to each other. They purportedly used body language to coordinate their groups whenever they hunted for their food. Certain nonverbal signals are considered universal. For instance, no matter where in the world you are, the locals will know that when you smile, you are showing happiness, enjoyment, or contentment. Smiling shows that you mean no harm. Even if you speak different languages, people know the meanings of certain body language cues. How come these nonverbal cues are universal? Despite some cultural differences, it is still possible to see similarities. Despite the fact that humans have varying ethnicities, there are still a lot of similarities, which explains the almost exact uses of body language. Some communication experts believe that around 7% of the real message of a person can be detected based on the actual words used when talking. Meanwhile, around 38% can solely derive it using the tone of voice. It is also very surprising to see that around 55% of the real meaning of a person's speech can be detected by observing facial expressions and body language. In other words, even if you talk to someone who has a different language, you can just observe their bodily cues to find out what they are telling you. Human beings instinctively use body language, especially in interacting with everything and everyone in their environment. Breaking away from this instinctual behavior can be difficult to do unless you undergo intensive training. Benefits of reading body language. To further convince you to get into learning how to read people's body language, here are some of the biggest benefits that you can receive if you become skilled in this area. Helps you learn how to connect with people. According to different studies, 60 to 90% of communications are done through nonverbal cues or body language. By learning everything about reading and decoding body language, connecting with people will be easier as your skills in this field will serve as your ultimate weapon. You can pick up the small gestures and changes in a person's voice to understand them much better, thereby making a stronger connection. Improves your business and negotiation skills. If you are an entrepreneur, you absolutely need to know how to read and use body language, regardless of what kind of business you're into. Your business may fail or succeed depending on how you can effectively recognize and adapt to people's body language. Let's say you have a meeting with a prospective client. Do not just focus solely on your pitch. It is also crucial to observe the response of your client. This will prevent you from missing out a couple of important body language cues, like crossed arms or when they are constantly looking at their watch. That may signify that they are no longer interested in what you were saying. If you had only seen these signs and interpreted them correctly, you would have made some adjustments on your pitch that would have helped you close the deal. By recognizing body language and the proper way of reciprocating it, you can gain positive results on your business deals and negotiations. Even new entrepreneurs have a high chance of getting great deals if they know how to communicate and interact with present and prospective clients. You can also use this knowledge to keep yourself from getting cheated. Helps you avoid conflicts. Human beings display certain types of body language whenever they are upset or angry. If you know how to identify these, you can do what is needed to avoid conflicts. If you notice your partner is starting to show defensive body language and nonverbal cues of anger, you can do something before it escalates. You can also use body language in preventing conflicts in the family, workplace, or among your friends. Increases your knowledge about your own body language. What sort of signals are you transmitting? How are you making others feel just by being there? Decoding body language also makes you more aware of the cues you transmit and how they affect others. For instance, let's say you have been rewatching the good seasons of Game of Thrones and then King Joffrey enters the scene. You start noticing that you instinctively crossed your arms. This is what's called nonverbal blocking. This is an almost automatic reaction of the human body whenever it encounters something that it dislikes. With your knowledge on body language, you can control your own since it is already clear to you what you are also demonstrating out there. You even have the option to use it in influencing your mood. Let's say, for instance, that you feel bad and upset. You just need to stand up, puff up your chest, and hold your head up high. Just striking this pose will make you feel better instantly. It is like you were embodying the headspace that you pretended to be in. By learning about body language and how it conveys emotions and feelings, you can use it to do the reverse on yourself. Provide a different perspective of the world. Learning body language and how to read people will be like when Morpheus asked Neo to choose between the red and blue pill in the Matrix. In this case, the red pill is you learning how to read body language. How come? Once you become an expert in body language, you may have a difficult time stopping yourself from using it. Reading people would almost become second nature to you. Your brain will constantly look for body language cues from the people you interact with and those whom you just see during your daily life. It could either be an advantage or a disadvantage for you. Fortunately, you will somewhat be able to judge people easily and find out who are the ones who truly have good intentions. Note, though, that by not exercising proper caution and allowing your biases to rule on your judgment and mind, it is highly likely that you will only witness their bad side. With that, be extra careful every time you decide to use this ability. You have to use it responsibly and not let your personal biases get you jaded at the rest of the world. Regardless of what you choose between the red and the blue pill, reading body language will let your brain work actively in finding what you prefer to see in people. Expect to be impressed with how much information and detail you can get and suddenly see. The downsides to learning how to read people's body language are only a few. In fact, the benefits vastly outweigh the drawbacks, so you should definitely at least try to learn it. Learning to identify and read human body language will change the way you view the world, and that is an understatement. Nonverbal cues and their meanings. Nonverbal cues are the essence of body language. This chapter will cover the different involuntary body movements and cues you should observe and watch out for in people so you can understand them better. You will also know the length of time needed to translate them. Unfortunately, this book is not big enough to list and discuss the total number of nonverbal cues of human body language, but it will definitely cover the basics. After learning the subtle signs that you should look for, you may think that they are actually quite obvious. In hindsight, though, you may not have been aware of these signals unless you studied them. To help you get started at learning body language cues, here are some signals to look for actively. Detecting and decoding micro-expressions. Micro-expressions refer to the minuscule facial movements that arise when people feel certain emotions. You have to search for these cues to find out what specific emotions people currently feel. In addition, some micro-expressions are completely involuntary, so you can use them anytime you want to validate if someone is being truthful or not. Joy. The micro expression for joy may just be the most underrated of the different facial expressions. A smile is more complex than most people realize. There are literally dozens of different smiles. Each smile differs slightly in appearance and conveys slightly different messages. Happiness or enjoyment involves many different emotions, including relief, arousal, ecstasy, wonder, and compassion, among many other positive feelings. However, you can also smile due to a negative emotion, like when you experience Schadenfreude, German for feeling joy over someone else's misfortune. Obviously, happiness shows through smiling, which can often be defined by the corners of your mouth pointing upward. There is also a tendency for your cheeks to move up, causing the lower eyelids to lift. To ensure that a person's smile is authentic, look for the characteristic smile lines around the corners of the mouth and the eyes, crow's feet. These typically appear on the face when the smile is genuine. In addition, a genuine smile comes and goes at a natural pace. A fake one lingers on the face for an uncomfortably long time. It almost seems like the face looks frozen. Surprise. If you suddenly encounter an unexpected event, it will trigger your surprise microexpression. Our brains are continuously imagining an image of the ideal environment, one where we feel completely safe and a place that is familiar to us. This is the reason why your brain is always trying to predict or guess what will happen to you. This is an evolutionary quirk that allows humans to always be ready to react to whatever happens. However, if something happens that is strikingly different from what is expected to happen, it will trigger the brain's surprise reaction, which is part of the flight or fight response. When you are surprised, your pupils will dilate and cause you to hyperfocus on the threat. Your heart rate may also rise significantly, which signifies your desire to escape the situation if needed. The facial expressions associated with the emotion of surprise include, but are not limited to, the following: slightly pulled up upper eyelids, jaw drops down all of a sudden, the mouth is agape, fast and rapid breathing. Sometimes, the facial expression associated with surprise looks like those linked with fear. However, with fear, you will see horizontal wrinkles across the forehead. Contempt. Of the 7 universal emotions, the only one that is asymmetrical is contempt. When you feel contempt, only one corner of the mouth pulls up, resembling a half smile. This is the reason why most people often confuse contempt with happiness, even though their meanings are quite different. Contempt is the feeling a person gets when they feel superior to another or when they don't simply show respect to the other. It is obviously so negative that it can hamper and ruin relationships. Therefore, you should prevent it from manifesting as much as possible. It is also the emotion shown by many who want to psychologically and physically distance themselves from someone. Contempt is never a productive emotion. It only hinders proper conversations and gets in the way of proper understanding and empathy toward them. Anger. Think of the last time when you felt really angry. What happened that triggered your anger? Typically, people feel anger whenever they are mistreated, threatened, or if something or someone keeps them from reaching their goal. This means that you can view anger as a natural response to environmental threats. Essentially, anger prevents human beings from being mistreated, injured, or even killed. Anger is a primal response to make potential threats back off and leave us human beings be. Whether it comes from a real or imaginary threat, anger heightens our senses and gets the adrenaline pumping. In most cases, one tends to display anger with their eyebrows pulled down at the center, their eyes bulging a bit, and their lower eyelids pulled upwards slightly. The lips are compressed slightly, forming a line, or they can also be spread a bit to expose the teeth. The last one resembles teeth clenching in animals. In fact, anger is not exclusive to humans. Many animal species also show displays of anger and aggression. Sadness. Sadness is the emotional reaction to emotional pain or in response to loss. You can feel sadness from small disappointments to severe grief. Loss can take on many forms, so there are many reasons why one feels sad. You can often detect sadness when the corners of a person's mouth droop down. The eyelids are also a bit relaxed, giving the eye sort of a triangular shape. The muscles in the chin are also slightly pulled up. Humans usually show sadness to signify their need for empathy and help. Fear. When speaking in evolutionary terms, fear is probably the oldest emotion that humans have developed. Fear was carried over from the primate ancestors of humans from millions of years ago to modern human beings. In fact, fear is one of the primary triggers of human beings' fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is when the body prepares to either flee from the threat or confront it. When this is engaged, expect an increase in the blood flow to your muscles. The breathing and heart rate get faster, and the adrenaline is just coursing through the veins. Fear lets people somehow foresee the possible dangers that might threaten their safety. This is the reason why you should not just simply ignore the feelings of fear. Regarding the facial expressions associated with it, you will notice that the upper eyelids are usually pulled up. This shows the white parts of the eyes above the iris. In addition, the eyebrows are often pulled upwards as well. This causes horizontal lines to appear across the forehead. The mouth might be either opened or closed, or it can also be stretched sideways. The micro-expressions linked to fear are often mistaken for surprise, especially if they occurred quickly. However, one way to tell them apart is when the surprised face looks a bit more relaxed. Disgust. People experience disgust whenever they encounter anything that is toxic, regardless if it is emotional, moral, or physically disgusting. From an evolutionary standpoint, people knew how to recognize disgust on others' faces in order to prevent them from getting poisoned or infected. The common response to disgust is to withdraw from the source. When someone is expressing disgust, the eyebrows are a bit lower, the nose is upturned and wrinkled, and the eyes are narrowed. It can also be characterized by a lifted upper lip, forming the two vertical lines from both sides of your nose to the corners of your mouth. One thing to keep in mind is that disgust can often be mistaken for anger, specifically when the micro-expressions appear quickly since both emotions have similar features. However, one way to tell them apart is the fact that anger is usually accompanied by head movements, while the head does not have that much. The hidden meanings behind gestures and posture. A person's movements and body gestures are some of the most obvious forms of body language. When someone is waving, pointing at something, using their fingers to represent numerical values, or showing approval or disagreement, all these gestures are easy to understand. However, you have to be careful as some hand gestures have different cultural meanings. Be careful when you flash a thumbs up or peace sign in other countries, as these might have different meanings than what they are used to. Here are some examples of the most common hand gestures and their usual meanings. Clenched fist. This can indicate anger or a sign of solidarity when held up high. A thumbs up or down. This is usually used to show approval or disapproval. The OK sign. This gesture is made by touching the thumb and index finger to form a circle, and the other three fingers extended. This sign can either be a symbol for OK or all right, but it can also be seen as a vulgar gesture in certain parts of the world. The V sign. This gesture is made by making a fist and extending the index finger and middle fingers to form the letter V. In most parts of the world, this sign means peace or declaring victory. However, in the UK and Australia, this gesture becomes vulgar when the palm is pointing inward. The position of the arms and legs. You can also convey nonverbal cues using your arms and legs. For instance, if you cross your arms, it indicates that you are defensive. When you are sitting down while crossing your legs and pointing them away from someone, you are saying that you are uncomfortable with and dislike the conversation. Another signal that you can convey with your arms and legs is to stand with them expanding around your sides. It is a good signal to convey if your goal is to appear larger and more imposing. One example is when planning to assert and show your dominance. On the other hand, you can place your hands close to your sides, seemingly to make yourself look smaller. You can do this as a means of deflecting attention away from yourself. If you are analyzing someone's body language, you have to pay close attention to the signals conveyed by their arms and legs, including the following. Crossed arms. This typically indicates that someone is feeling defensive or closed off and not willing to listen to another's opinions at the moment. Standing with hands on the hips. In most cases, this shows that you feel in control of the conversation. This particular signal may also indicate aggressiveness. Clasping the hands together behind the back. You have to get more context for this gesture, which you can derive from the other body language cues. This gesture means that the person is feeling impatient, bored, or rather frustrated. Crossed legs. This can mean either feeling closed off or defensive. It may also be a subtle sign that the other person is asking for some privacy. Flailing hands and arms while speaking. People typically do this to put emphasis on the words they are speaking. You can often find people who use somewhat animated hand gestures when they are haggling or negotiating for a better deal. Posture. It is also possible to sense and detect the thoughts of a person if you observe closely how they carry and present themselves. In this case, you have to observe their posture and composure. Posture is the way people hold their bodies and their unique physical form overall. You can gather a lot of information about what and how a person is feeling, plus you can obtain hints about their personality. For example, sitting up straight signifies that you primarily focus on what someone is telling you and the things that happen around you. Meanwhile, if you hunch over, it will give the idea of indifference and boredom. When reading body language, pay close attention to or observe whether the other has an open or closed body posture. The open posture happens when they show most of their torso. This posture exudes confidence, being open to new ideas and friendliness. On the other hand, a closed posture usually consists of concealing the trunk of the body, hunching forward, and/or crossing the legs and arms. This posture indicates that one is wary of you and your intentions. It might also signify hostility and/or anxiety. Keeping personal space. Have you ever had someone stand so close to you that it feels really awkward? This is what we refer to as personal space. Imagine a bubble around your body. As long as nobody gets so close to you and the bubble does not burst, that is your personal space. The amount of personal space that you put between you and the person you are communicating with indicates body language. Experts say that there are 4 levels of personal space, namely, intimate. This level of personal space indicates that you have a close relationship and greater comfort towards the other person. The distance kept is between 6 to 18 inches. There's also instances when direct contact, like touching, hugging, and kissing on the cheeks, is allowed. Unless you have a deep relationship with the other, like a parent, spouse, or child, you won't be able to get this close to another. However, the occasional hug may happen. Personal. The personal distance is around 1.5 to 4 feet, and this is usually reserved for relatives or close friends. If a person keeps this amount of space between you both, then they are declaring that they consider you a good friend and that they can trust you. Social. This level or amount of distance kept between two persons is usually ideal for acquaintances. The distance kept is usually between 4 to 12 feet. You would usually keep this amount of distance from co-workers who you interact with just a couple of times a week but don't really consider close friends. Public. This is the amount of physical distance typically used between speakers and their audiences. Let's say that you are tasked to speak in class or deliver a presentation in the workplace. In that situation, you decided to put at least 12 feet of space between you and the person closest to you. The ideal personal space also depends on the culture of people you are talking to. Some cultures require more personal space than others. For instance, people from Latin American countries are quite comfortable at getting close to each other. Meanwhile, those up in North America need considerably more space. Tips for faster body language reading. When you are reading one's body language, you rarely have more than enough time. When planning to analyze someone, you have to do it fast. That way, you can gather vital information before they begin sensing what you are doing. To help you become a more effective body language reader, here are a couple tips. Differentiate positive and negative body language. You need to learn and master how to differentiate the two. Essentially, All body language cues can be categorized into two. It could be positive or negative. Restudy the body language cues that you already know and compartmentalize them into either negative or positive cues. That way, you will already know where to place them once you see them later. Look at the big picture. Don't focus too much on one area. If the facial microexpressions say that the person is happy, don't jump to conclusions yet. You should confirm your suspicions by checking the other parts of body language, like posture and gestures. Focus on the eyes. To get a quick yet somewhat accurate read on someone's facial microexpressions, you should focus your attention on the eyes. It is easy to fake smiles, but expressions using the eyes are significantly more difficult. For instance, you will know that someone is genuinely and truly happy if you see crow's feet at the corner of their eyes. Mentioned are just a few of the possible body language cues that people can make. By gathering experience, you can discover the unique personalities of others and learn from them. However, even with just the examples mentioned above, you can still gather lots of usable information from people. Body Language and NLP. Is the main and only purpose for reading body languages only to tell what one feels at a certain time? The answer is no, as comprehensive knowledge about decoding body language has plenty of uses. Letting you know what a person feels exactly is just one of the many uses of learning how to read the nonverbal cues sent by those around you. Another area where you can use such knowledge is NLP, or the popular neuro-linguistic programming. What is NLP? Neuro-linguistic programming, which we will henceforth refer to as NLP, is a method of changing one's thoughts and behaviors in order for you to achieve your desired outcome. And by someone's thoughts, I mean they can be another person's or your own. NLP uses communication, behavioral, and perceptual techniques to make it easier to persuade those around you to change their way of thinking. It is useful in influencing their actions to a specific level. This technique was developed in the 1970s initially as a way to identify successful people's thought patterns and behaviors and then teach these to others who want to emulate their success. However, the developers of NLP did not anticipate that their system can actually address the diverse issues people face. What can you do with NLP? NLP is a big help for effective self-improvement. It can help you a lot in case you find yourself having poor self-confidence, self-awareness, and communication skills. In addition, NLP can purportedly be used to do the following: reprogram the mind to follow healthier habits, help change your viewpoint, change or remove bad behavior, learn new good behavior, help with the healing process due to mental trauma, help reduce anxiety and control phobias. NLP is also said to have the potential to act as a therapeutic tool for those who are suffering from mental health problems, including irrational fears, phobias, and anxiety. It can also supposedly help ease depression. How does NLP work? NLP works by detecting and then modifying a person's unconscious biases or the limitations of the map of an individual's world. However, in a pinch, you can also use body language to study their behavior discreetly. One reminder regarding the use of any NLP technique is that you can't liken it to hypnotherapy. You will not be putting ideas in an unconscious person's head, but you will be discreetly changing their thoughts and in the process, their behavior too. For instance, one of the central features that define NLP is that people have biases toward one sensory system referred to as the Preferred Representational System, PRS. Trained therapists can figure out someone's PRS through their conversations. For instance, if one says, "I see your point," it may indicate that they have a visual PRS. Meanwhile, "I hear you" may mean that one has an auditory PRS. In NLP, a practitioner will be able to identify another person's PRS by reading their body language and then creating their therapeutic framework around the said information. How do you use body language with NLP? There are plenty of reasons why body language plays an integral role in NLP. One of the biggest uses of body language in NLP is to help build or break rapport with another person. Using your body language properly with NLP will make you an effective salesperson, help you improve your relationships, and promote ease in connecting with other people. Body language can help you make connections, and you can also use it to break them, often unintentionally. When it comes to rapport, 50 to 60% of the effort into making it comes from your physiology. A few examples are your posture when you sit, the position of your arms compared to your body, if your body tilts forward or back, whether you are sitting or dancing. In terms of your physiology, the following actions can occur. Match body language. You can subtly copy what the other person is doing. For example, you can touch your right earlobe once you notice the person you are communicating with touches their right earlobe too. If done enough times, the other may reciprocate what you are doing. Mirror body language. This is a bit more effective compared to matching the other person. By mimicking the movements of the other, though this time it can be likened to a mirror image, you can get a better response from the other. You will discover that after mirroring your subject a couple of times, they will mimic you back sooner than expected. Break rapport intentionally. There are instances when you just do not want anything to do with the person. During these moments, it is great to know how to break rapport just by using your body language. That way you can leave a conversation politely. How NLP can help you in real life. NLP combined with body language can be an extremely powerful tool if your goal is to influence those around you. However, it is important to reiterate the fact that NLP is totally different from hypnosis. It does not require you to implant anything into someone's mind. It just involves influencing the other. In some cases, you will have to persuade the other to improve the quality of their life. In addition, you can use NLP and body language to help yourself with whatever problems you might have. Here are a couple of things where NLP is useful and applicable. Controls your emotions. Once you are aware of the basics of reading emotional microexpressions, it is also highly likely for you to detect them whenever you experience them. Several are even left unaware that their feelings are starting to rule them. If you gain more knowledge about body language and how to decode it, you can immediately catch your feelings and emotions before they become too overwhelming that you will have a hard time controlling them. Upon catching yourself getting a bit too emotional, you can use NLP to help ensure that it will not happen again. You can use body language cues as triggers to start your NLP. By doing that, you can stop yourself or redirect your energy into something more productive. Improves your communication skills. Decoding body language makes you more aware of how others feel. Once you know that, you can easily adjust your tone and lessen the awkwardness and discomfort in a conversation. For instance, if there is an indication that the one you are talking to is already a bit angry at the middle of your talk, you can lighten the mood and make it more positive by dialing down your tone. After that, you can use NLP to program the other person subtly to influence them to side with what you are saying. For instance, upon noticing that the other feels threatened and starts to get angry, you can de-escalate the situation by using non-threatening body language and physical cues to train their behavior and reactions. This skill makes you a much better communicator because you will also be taking the other's emotions into account. You also have the option to use similar emotions to ensure that they appear more amicable based on your perspective. Allows you to make an instant connection. Why do you need to make instant connections? For entrepreneurs, this is an extremely vital skill since it is the key to networking in the business world rapidly. Through body language reading, you can detect a person's personality and maybe a bit of their behavior. Learning one's particular set of body language will make it easier for you to use NLP techniques to build rapport with the other. For instance, once you notice that the other person tries to strike a defensive post, you can mirror their body language in order to somewhat make them lower their guard. Continue mirroring, and you will be able to somehow connect to the other person in a much deeper manner. NLP techniques you can use every day. To further increase the fun and excitement of learning and decoding body language with the aid of NLP, here is a glimpse of the usual NLP techniques for daily application if you wish to make the quality of your life better. Reframing your emotions. This NLP technique is one you can use to change your negative emotions into positive ones instantly. In this case, you should be knowledgeable about micro-expressions for each feeling or emotion and identify those with several similarities. Let's say that you are currently experiencing stress or anxiety. It is possible to reframe the way you think by believing that what you are actually feeling is excitement. There is no need to believe exactly what you are telling yourself. The only thing you have to do is reframe your perception of your negative emotions. Anchoring yourself. When thinking of something, especially one that you think of hard enough, you can use your senses to feel it. For instance, upon thinking of your favorite food, let's say a burger from your favorite burger joint, you will first remember how it looks. Upon thinking about it deeper and harder, you can imagine the way it tastes and probably actually taste it in your mind. This premise is applicable every time you don't feel that positive. For instance, if you have a scheduled job interview and you feel extremely nervous, it is possible to trick your mind so you will appear more confident. You first need to work on your body language. First, you have to stand with both your feet apart. You should then puff your chest up, then lift your chin a bit. Do this for a couple of minutes, after which you will notice a sudden rise in your level of confidence. Hold that confident feeling in you, then create an anchor for it by pressing your left earlobe firmly. Once it is already your turn for the interview, close your eyes and press your left earlobe. The stimulus will trigger the confident feeling that you programmed into yourself, which allows you to have the confidence you need to handle the interview. Priming. This technique will delve a bit into the dark psychology region. The main reason is that this is a bit on the manipulation side. You can primarily use this technique in marketing and advertising. Priming involves using certain kinds of stimuli to condition a person's brain to think a certain way. For instance, when you are browsing through a selection of wines in a winery and the proprietors play French music, it will prime you into thinking that maybe you would like some French wine right about now. To use priming in real life, you must first plant the seed. For instance, if you wish your friends to watch the basketball game with you, you can plant the seed by reminding them about the event. You can say, "Hey, you remember last month when we went to watch the Bucks play?" Next, before your friend even gets a chance to analyze and criticize the memory you just triggered, you need to divert their attention immediately. This will cause a sort of amnesia in your friend's mind. Some of the things you can do include cracking an unrelated joke or changing the topic abruptly. You also have to change the tone of your voice to a different one compared to what you used when you planted the seed. Do this process again for several days, weeks, or months. Make sure that the frequency should depend on the magnitude of your request. In this case, since the basketball game is still upcoming, you can choose to complete the process in 1 to 2 weeks. Before the last push, inculcate a positive state of mind to the other party. You can do this quickly by mirroring your friend and then persuading them into a happier state. Present your idea by asking your body to watch the next home game of the Bucks with you. They would feel somewhat confused yet excited about what you proposed, and they would likely agree. Mentioned are just a couple of the most effective NLP techniques that are useful and applicable in real-life situations. Some of them might seem manipulative. It would be all right to use these techniques if you have no intention to put the other person in danger. However, you have to be discreet when using these techniques on others, especially if you just learned about them. The reason is that it will take practice before you can do these techniques almost flawlessly. Body language and dark psychology. Another way for you to utilize your new knowledge of reading body language is to integrate it with dark psychology techniques. Now, I know that you are still worried about using it first, especially if you are still wondering whether or not dark psychology techniques are ethical. Just basing your judgment on the name, You would think that dark psychology is inherently evil, but that is not necessarily the case. So what is dark psychology? When you hear dark psychology, the first thing that would probably come to your mind is that it is a system to manipulate people into doing things they do not like. However, despite being controversial, it is important to know that dark psychology is a tool, so it is neither inherently good nor evil. Yes, some use dark psychology for detestable acts, but many also use it positively. For instance, you can find a lot of therapists who use dark psychology techniques to help patients overcome trauma, phobias, and fear. There are also instances when police detectives use dark psychology to make crime suspects confess or at least get important information from them. In a nutshell, dark psychology is a set of manipulation and persuasion techniques that you can use in making others do what you want. While dark psychology is being used for nefarious purposes, it is also possible to utilize it to help others. With that said, you should strengthen your moral compass before you start taking advantage of such techniques. What is not dark psychology? Now let's discuss dark psychology a bit deeper. To give you a bit more background on the subject, let's talk about the misconceptions about it. Dark psychology is not hypnosis. Although you can get a semblance of control over your target, it is not at a level that most people think about hypnosis. In fact, actual hypnosis is not as incredible as TV shows and movies make them out to be. In addition, you have to choose your target carefully because not all people are susceptible to hypnosis. Meanwhile, you can use dark psychology on anyone, provided you are aware of the proper techniques. You can also figure out what to use by observing their body language to get all the important information you need to form your strategy. Dark psychology is not neuro-linguistic programming. You can use NLP techniques in conjunction with dark psychology, but NLP is not inherently manipulative. You can set trigger stimuli to make your target feel whatever emotions you want them to. You are not technically manipulating anyone when you use NLP, but you have no choice but to manipulate people when you are using dark psychology. Dark psychology will not turn you into a cultist. Although you can manipulate people without them knowing, you cannot turn them into brainwashed followers. Even though dark psychology is powerful, it is not enough to turn people into blind followers that you can order around to do anything. Unless a person is extremely gullible, they will always have a bit of their will to prevent total submission. In addition, even if you could brainwash people, it will only be extremely temporary. Eventually, your power over a person will dissipate. It will get even faster if they find out what you did to them. What's the role of body language in dark psychology? Just like with neuro-linguistic programming, body language also plays a huge role in dark psychology. If you want to get under the skin of people, you don't just use your words. You will need to bolster your efforts using body language. In dark psychology, there is an extensive use of body language. Many techniques require body language so you can subtly implant cues into your target. So how can you use body language for dark psychological tactics? Dark psychology has many applications in everyday life, and here are a few of them. Dark psychology in dating. It may sound unpleasant, but you can use dark psychology to improve your chances of dating success. You can apply it to make your dates more complacent about what you want to do sexually, among other things. In most cases, if the dark psychology user is a man, then he will be stringing his partner along with him but without committing to a real relationship. Some of the things that he can do would be lying about his plans for the future and pretending to want to settle down soon, but just not yet. In most cases, the dark psychology user would also cheat on his partner and vehemently lie about it. He may show signs of wanting to commit to a relationship, but without real intentions. Another technique dark psychology users use is called chameleon manipulation. This is when the person would put on a mask of being the ideal person instead of their true self. They would pretend that they have almost the same interests that their targets have. This would make them want to lower their guard, giving the manipulator an opening to use more manipulation tactics. Now, when the manipulator is a female, what she would usually do is make herself the prize for the man to fight for. She would make her target believe that he has a chance, but would then turn him down. However, she would not do it in such a brutal manner. She would frame the rejection to make it seem like the man still has a shot at getting her if he would only try harder. Her aim is to string him along as long as she can. She would make the man completely engrossed in her so that he would always provide her with all the attention and gifts that she wants. There is a promise of a relationship, but her only interests are superficial and would readily dump the man if he could no longer provide her with what she wants. In addition, since men are evolutionarily more inclined to want sex more than women, a female manipulator would typically use it as a reward to get what they want. They would also refuse sex as a form of punishment. Dark psychology for groups. If a manipulator was ever given the authority over a group of people, they would use dark psychology to keep them dependent on their leadership and decrease whatever authority and autonomy they have. They would increase their control and leverage over their group members' well-being. There are several dark psychology techniques that manipulative group leaders usually use on their members. Make mountains out of molehills. A manipulator would make the other members believe that the problem is so serious that it will take the group's full cooperation with the leader to solve. The manipulator would make it seem that neither the leader nor the members working alone will make any progress, even though it would be easy if they thought about it. Mock and discourage dissenting opinions. Cult leaders would actively seek out members who have contradicting opinions and/or beliefs. Any divergent voices will be labeled as deceitful, or if the leader would want to seem like they are empathetic, they would say that the individuals are just ignorant. They would ridicule dissenting thoughts so the other members would only believe the words coming from the leader. Create an imaginary enemy. Another dark psychology technique used by manipulative leaders is to fabricate a common enemy that is so big that the entire group needs to unite to defeat it. The manipulator would make the enemy so big and powerful that the members would believe that the only safe place for them is within the group. Dark psychology for business purposes. When you are using dark psychology within a company setting, you will essentially manipulate the employees into believing that they are part of something big, something that is such a big deal that they will need to sacrifice their individualities to help the company. The leader would make it seem that they are accepting input from the members, but they would only take the bare minimum of their contributions. Some of the things that manipulative leaders would often say include the following: "We're a team or family. We will win or lose together. You all matter to us. Together, we can change the world." These are some of the mottos that manipulative bosses would say to make the employees work in unfavorable conditions, accept salaries that are below what they deserve, and others, all in the name of working for the greater good. Having managers who have dark personality traits are often the unintentional effect of choosing people who somewhat match the typical characteristics of a good leader. If you are out looking for a job, steer clear of corporations with managers who tend to have dark personalities, as they are the ones who are more likely to use manipulative tactics. Also, avoid expecting that you can get help from their direct superiors, as the company itself handpicked them for the job. In each of these applications, body language played a huge role. For instance, in dating, people would use mirroring body language to build rapport. In the company setting, the manipulative person would read the room to get the emotions and mood of the attendees. If you find that the people are not reacting that well to what you are saying, you can use their body language to gauge their mood. Manipulation and persuasion for beginners. Now we have reached one of the most crucial parts of this book. You will now actually start learning how you can use body language and a bit of dark psychology to get the results you wanted from every interaction. You will be using manipulation and persuasion techniques. so expect to feel uncomfortable doing it at first because its nature involves dark psychology. Before we start learning about the techniques, let us first discuss what manipulation and persuasion are and how you can distinguish them. Although both persuasion and manipulation involve influencing other people, there are significant nuances between the two that make them stand apart from each other. What is persuasion? Persuasion refers to the process of making people do or believe in something that they would not typically do without another person influencing them. In most cases, when someone attempts to persuade or encourage you to believe or do something, their end goal is to give the two of you equal benefits. However, this does not mean you will look at things the other person is providing you as something beneficial. For instance, if a pastor or minister is trying to convince you to come to church, the intention is typically positive. You may end up getting offended, though, especially if you already have your own religion and are a strong believer of it. I'm not saying that persuasion cannot be used for negative purposes. The user will still be the one to determine the ultimate goal or purpose. People can persuade others to invest their money into ventures that they know full well are scams, among other things. What is manipulation? Unlike persuasion, which can be argued to be a neutral method, manipulation is without a doubt quite insidious. Even if you have noble intentions, you still manipulate a person into doing something that you want. With manipulation, you typically only have your intentions in mind. It could be to deceive, misinform, mislead, and victimize others. Even if the manipulator has a somewhat noble reason for the manipulation, it can leave a foul taste in the mouth of the target of the deception. On the other hand, those accused of being manipulators may also feel upset, as the ones who already caught their action may also perceive them as immoral and evil. Differences between persuasion and manipulation. Intention. The biggest difference between persuasion and manipulation is the intent. In general, people who apply persuasion tactics have one goal in the end. That is to provide a mutually beneficial result. This means both of you will be typically happy in the end. For example, if a salesperson approaches you, their main intention is to sell you something and gain a commission from it. You will also be receiving a product in return, which is the benefit you can get from the act. However, there are also those who use persuasion tactics for negative purposes. For example, if you try to convince someone to buy a product that is in reality useless. This is the reason why persuasion can neither be good nor bad. It is somewhat neutral. It will depend on the user what kinds of outcomes they want persuasion to produce. With manipulation, the results will always lean towards the person using the method. Even if the intentions are somewhat good, the methods used will always be insidious. Also, even though the intended outcome is mutually beneficial, the fact that you manipulated the other person towards achieving it leaves a bitter taste in the mouth of the other. So unlike persuasion, manipulation can never be truly beneficial for both parties involved. The target will always be victimized. However, you can tone down the negative effects and just do the minimum amount of manipulation as possible. Impact, result. The person at the receiving end of persuasion can gain positive results after the interaction. They may also face disappointment depending on the intent of the one doing the persuasion. This means that it has positive or negative results depending on the user. Meanwhile, if a person gets manipulated, there will always be a negative feeling linked to the outcome, whether the target of the manipulation gained a beneficial outcome or not. The fact that they were manipulated to reach the said outcome will always make the target feel violated. Trust. The trust between the user and the target will also differ. A person who used persuasion on another will usually still retain the trust they curried from the target. However, the trust between a person using manipulation techniques and their victim will always be tarnished in one way or another. Such is what happens when a person manipulates another using invasive and insidious means. Affiliation. People who typically use persuasion come from religious groups, but not necessarily from cult groups. Several members of different religious groups, as well as some atheists, utilize persuasion techniques to encourage and convince others to be one with them. On the other hand, a manipulative person does not usually have any affiliation. They usually just work for themselves. Those who use extreme manipulation techniques typically do not have any friends, especially once those around them find out what they have been doing. Their families also usually do not want anything to do with them, as manipulation techniques usually alienate the users from their inner social circles. Using a person's body language to influence them. There are many techniques used in dark psychology, but we will only be discussing the basic ones in this book. Still, the basic techniques you will learn here will be enough to help you as a beginner. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is an insidious technique that aims to manipulate a person by feeding them so much misinformation that they would gradually doubt themselves. When you gaslight someone, they would question their reality and even their own memories until such a point that they would totally believe whatever you, the manipulator, say. To gaslight a person, you have to build rapport with them first. Start with reading their body language and current mood. If the person shows signs of being defensive, you will need to read more into them to persuade them to bring down their guard gradually. For instance, if the other person has their hands and feet crossed, you need to copy their other body language cues while holding a light conversation. Once the person's defenses go down, you can begin with your gaslighting. Start lying about small and somewhat insignificant things and then move on to more serious things. For instance, when you find even a small disagreement between you two, you can begin to make the other doubt their side. You can bolster your manipulation by using the right body language and micro-expressions. In this case, you will have to use assertive and authoritative body language and posturing, as well as fake sincerity and excitement. You can also manipulate certain details in the local environment to confuse your target and make them doubt their beliefs. This can even make them doubt their own experiences. Passive aggression. You can also manipulate another person by faking passive-aggressive behavior. This technique is used to hurt and confuse the target deeply. Most people would have to deal with those who have passive-aggressive ways, like roommates who leave dirty dishes in the sink and co-workers who slack off, leaving you with the bulk of the work. Passive-aggressiveness is usually imminent when someone is angry but tries to conceal any obvious sign of having this negative emotion. However, their other actions, like stomping around the room, ignoring the target, and other things, make it seem like they are angry. These conflicting signals will leave the target confused as to what to do, making them more susceptible to manipulation. The target knows that arguing with someone who has passive-aggressive behavior will only make things worse, so they will be more amicable to your requests. When you are using this technique, you only have to show subtle body language for anger. For instance, if you interact or talk to your target, you have to avoid meeting their gaze. It also helps to respond by using only single words or just guttural sounds. Also, give the target glimpses of anger micro-expressions. A quick half-second of furrowed eyebrows every now and then should be enough to keep your target on their toes. Keep an eye out for changes in your target's body language. If they are showing signs of confusion and anger, you can increase your passive-aggressive behavior until they eventually cave. Cognitive distortions. This refers to a technique where you will make your target's thought patterns so distorted that they would believe that they have no other choice than to believe in what you say. This technique makes use of irrational or extremely biased thought patterns that will make your target doubt themselves. This technique may seem similar to gaslighting, but it is a bit different. There are several types of cognitive distortion techniques that you can use, including catastrophizing. This tactic is all about implanting the thought of complete catastrophe in the head of your target. This happens when you make them think that even a little mistake will cause a domino effect, leading to complete disaster. With catastrophizing, the target will most likely feel scared and walk on eggshells most of the time. Personalization. In this technique, you will put the blame on the target for an incident they have no control over. For instance, you tell your target that the reason a mutual acquaintance of yours is in such a bad mood or feels distressed is because of something that the target did. You will have to frame this accusation using fake sincerity and concern to make it more believable and also for your target to become defensive against you. Mind reading. This is not mind reading in the literal term. This is just assuming that you know what your target is thinking of, but without showing any evidence to support your claim. You will have to make your message quite vague so that your target will eventually cave and prattle possible reasons why you think that way. Overgeneralization. This involves making your target draw broad and general conclusions. Let's say that your target failed to accomplish a certain task. In this case, you may start persuading them or making them believe that doing their best will only cause them to waste their time and effort. This will make the target doubt their abilities, making them less self-confident and more susceptible to even more manipulation and persuasion. All or nothing. In this tactic, you will have to limit the possible outcomes that your target can hope for. A simple and somewhat innocent way of using this is when you want to choose the restaurant for your date. You can ask your partner whether they want to eat chicken or fish. This makes it seem like the target has a choice in the matter, but the truth is, you already limited the choices to those that you want. These techniques are designed to muddle the thoughts of your target by overloading their minds with too much information in rapid-fire succession. Location advantage. Do you want to get the upper hand in any situation? Then ensure that you work on making your target go out of their comfort zone. This will disorient your target, making them drop any mental defenses that they might have put up against you. This technique is useful if you are planning to go on a date and you want to leave a good impression. In this case, you need to do something new, like bring them to a nice place that is new to them. It should be a place or activity that is significantly different from the ones they are familiar with. For instance, if the person typically likes going to different clubs, take them somewhere quiet and intimate. This radical change in environment will confuse your target, and maybe even make them a bit scared. So look for signs of these emotions. If such signs of distress become visible and noticeable, it is safe to say that you are able to break down their defenses. In other words, you can begin exerting your control over them. Emotional manipulation. This is a collection of different techniques that will let you play with your target's emotions. When it comes to emotional manipulation, you will have to expose your target to a lot of emotional abuse, leading to their inability to think for themselves. Some emotional manipulation tactics include guilt tripping. This involves making the target feel responsible for your actions. For instance, say you bought a car, and your partner confronts you for making such a huge purchase without consulting them. You can rebut by saying that the reason why you bought the car is that you have been feeling stressed out at home because of your partner's constant nagging. Tell your partner that it is the only thing that makes you happy right now, but it is on the verge of being taken away from you. Love bombing. This is when you overwhelm your victim with so much attention, affection, and love in an attempt to make them unable to deny whatever request you may have. It resembles guilt tripping a bit, but it does not require you to say anything. The only important thing is to try to be the best partner. That way, once you ask for something from them anytime soon, they will feel compelled to honor your request as a means of giving back the favor they received from you. Stonewalling. This is sort of like the opposite of love bombing because you will be completely refusing to communicate or engage in any way with your target. This is similar to passive aggression, but you are not even answering the target even if they ask you directly if there is anything wrong. You can combine this technique with love bombing for an even heavier hit. You would love bomb the target for a couple of weeks and they suddenly stop talking and interacting. Predicting behavior based on body language and nonverbal cues. One way you can somewhat make your manipulation attacks a bit more effective is to predict what your target will be doing and then act before they can continue with their plan. A good way to predict your target's next move is by observing their body language. People are more driven by their emotions and not by logical thinking. You can use this to your advantage as you already know how to read people's body language. Let's say that someone you have been manipulating for a while suddenly shows signs of clarity. The signs you should look for are anger and surprise. When you have taken note of the emotions brewing inside your target, you need to do something to quell the said emotions so you can take back the reins. Another way to predict your target's next move is to check their actual body language. For instance, you are talking with another person, and they are showing signs of boredom and disinterest. To prevent the person from leaving, you can start using assertive body language and lighten up the conversation to create more interest in your projects. Building resistance against dark psychological tactics. Now that you've learned how to use dark psychology for manipulation and persuasion purposes, it is time to understand how to protect yourself from it. You would not be much of a dark psychology user if the same techniques that you learned can also be used on you quite easily. Here, you will discover ways to detect potential threats immediately and the techniques that will help you turn the tides in your favor. Why should you protect yourself? Dark psychology attacks can leave lasting negative effects on the victims. Note that even if you have some knowledge on dark psychology and how to use it, it will not cause you to be immune to it. Here are some potential damages that you can sustain from dark psychology attacks. Psychological damage. The most obvious effect of dark psychology is psychological harm. As you can see, most of those who are victimized by manipulation and other tactics that abuse them developed mental conditions. Some examples are anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other forms of mental trauma. This psychological damage has lasting effects. If left untreated, there is a high chance for the damage to become permanent. Social divide. Many also use dark psychology to divide people and create conflict. A single manipulative person can cause enough disruption inside a sizable group of people to break them into as many factions as they want. The manipulator would play with the members' emotions, behaviors, and beliefs. They can create a polarized, intolerant, and sometimes even violent environment. Trust issues. Using dark psychology can ruin one's ability to trust another human being again. Some manipulation victims felt so traumatized that they ended up developing trust issues. This leads them to become basically recluses who no longer want to be part of any society. The negative effects of dark psychology can be quite brutal and can affect more harm than just one individual. This makes it necessary to be extra vigilant all the time. Keep an eye out for manipulators and the dark tactics they use. Note, though, that this should not also be a reason for you to doubt all people you meet and interact with. Make it a point to treat other people with respect, empathy, and dignity. You just have to start becoming more skeptical if you notice warning signs that you are in front of a manipulative person. Identifying the aggressor through their body language. You should identify who among the many different people you interact with daily could be a potential manipulator, which can be quite difficult. Most of them already know how to mask their emotions and intent. You can only pray that you don't run into those guys. However, there is a set of characteristics called the dark triad that chronic manipulators have. Here are the personality traits comprising the dark triad. Narcissism. Of the 3 traits in the dark triad, narcissism is actually the most difficult to find. One misconception about those who have narcissistic behaviors is that they are selfish. Note, though, that this is not the only indicator, as a lot of people, regardless if they are narcissistic or not, have the tendency to become selfish at certain times, too. This means that actual narcissism goes beyond selfishness and self-centeredness. A narcissist's only concern is about themselves. Even though all people would put themselves first occasionally, a narcissist would do this to the extreme. A narcissist would put their own needs at the forefront of every chance they can get. Typical narcissistic behavior makes them quite unable to form and maintain meaningful relationships with other people. The primary reason is that building a relationship involves taking into consideration what the other feels and needs. This is something that narcissists find so difficult to do. Subclinical psychopathy. Before we delve into what subclinical psychopathy is, let's first discuss what psychopathy is. A true psychopath is someone who has extreme antisocial behavior. These people are unable to feel empathy or remorse, but they would eventually learn how to fake these emotions quite well. In addition, a psychopath would also have a dampened and, in certain cases, no impulse control. This is the reason why they do not have any second thoughts telling people what's on their minds, no matter who hears it. These qualities are not just one-off occurrences that you can just shrug off. For a true narcissist, not having empathy and not being able to show remorse is a rule. They simply do not care. Psychopathy and subclinical psychopathy have more similarities than what most actually imagine and believe. It was even confirmed by several psychiatric researchers that the two only have a few differences. This means that a true psychopath and a subclinical psychopath would behave almost the same way. The difference between the two types of psychopathy is quantitative. A subclinical psychopath would display the same behavioral characteristics, but the effects that these have on their lives are not quite as extreme. The reason is they do not display their psychopathic behavior quite as often and as extreme. Machiavellianism. As the name suggests, Machiavellianism is a personality type that incorporates the idealisms of Niccolo Machiavelli, a Renaissance philosopher who authored the book The Prince. One of the main themes in the book is that the end naturally justifies the means, and that is the theme wherein people with Machiavellianism live their lives. People who have a Machiavellian personality are highly likely to become manipulative. Society views people with this personality as chronic liars, but their deceptiveness is much deeper than just simple lies. According to the Prince, a true Machiavellian knows how important it is to appear forthcoming while using deceptive means to get their desired outcomes. How to identify people with the dark triad traits. It can be quite a challenge for an untrained person to identify those who have dark triad personalities. They are so deceptive that they are typically charismatic and charming, too. They are masters at building rapport and can charm the pants off anyone they want to. If an expert manipulator is close to you, it will immediately make you feel like you are with someone whose intelligence, taste, and compassion is on a superior and high level. However, as good as they may be at deception, those with dark triad personalities cannot sustain this kind of perception forever. As mentioned in an earlier chapter, people cannot be manipulated into totally brainwashed servants. Eventually, the victims of deception will start feeling burnt out and will free themselves from the hold of the manipulator. Instead of suffering under a person with a dark triad personality, though, it would be infinitely better to avoid them at all costs. To prevent yourself from being victimized by them, be more vigilant and watch out for the following behaviors. Difficulty in sustaining relationships. Those with dark triad personalities are incapable of maintaining any kind of relationship. Note that this does not just encompass romantic relationships. Dark triad personalities seem to have no friends, and their coworkers tend to distance themselves from them too. Even their own families cannot stand their manipulative behavior, and many of them have been disowned. Dark triad people typically have a long list of failed relationships. They claim to have cut off a lot of people from their lives. The truth, though, is that they alienated themselves away from everyone that they have ever been in contact with. They play the victim card their entire lives. Dark triad personalities are also famous for being masters when it comes to gaslighting and implementing the narcissistic cycle of abuse. Once people call them out, they often put the blame on others, claiming that they are the actual victims. According to psychological experts, whenever a person with a dark triad personality gets triggered, they usually show rage and do acts of violence. It is also very easy to trigger them. In most cases, it is when they feel like there is a threat on their self-esteem and they are at a risk of getting abandoned. Their stories are always inconsistent. Even though people with dark triad traits are naturally talented when fabricating and manipulating information to suit their own interests, they cannot sustain it indefinitely. Putting up the perfect veneer takes a lot of effort and energy, and as time passes, they will start to get tired and mess up their stories. They would get their facts and other details of their stories mixed up and not add up. They would even make lame excuses for why they made mistakes. Seems like they have a chronic need to fulfill. One who has dark triad traits always seems to have a constant need to fulfill something even at the expense of those around them. Despite being the ones doing the manipulation, they always feel like they are the victim. They are never satisfied with whatever they have. If you are with a dark triad personality, you will feel constantly tired physically, financially, and emotionally. Dark triad personalities are like energy vampires. They suck the energy and will to live off the people within their range. Using NLP to turn the tables against your attacker. Once you realize that a manipulator is approaching you and trying to victimize you, do not panic. Remember that there are ways to protect yourself and turn the tides in your favor. Get rid of the person's motives. Manipulative people usually exploit certain situations in order to get their claws into others. For instance, they would do something nice for you one day so that you will feel compelled to return the favor someday. For instance, they would help you find a job, give you a small token or gift, and then would come back to you later in order to have you repay your debt. Do not give the manipulative person any motives that they can use against you. If they are giving you a gift, return it. If they say they will help you with your tasks, decline the offer and finish your work on your own. You will feel better that you don't owe anyone anything. If you don't have even an inkling of a motive, the manipulative person does not have an opening. Shift the focus to the manipulator. The last thing that a manipulative person expects is for their target to retaliate almost immediately. If a manipulator approaches you, ask them a couple of simple questions to throw off their concentration, such as the following. Will you really accept my opinion? Or are you just asking for the sake of asking? Are you really expecting me to do this for you? You know that I won't be getting anything out of this, right? If I decide on something, will you be able to accept whatever I say even if it contradicts your ideas? Do you have a coworker who likes to delegate their work to others so they can lighten their workload? If they ask for a favor again, you also have to ask in return if you can also delegate your work to them soon. These kinds of questions put the manipulative person on the spot and throw off their concentration. This can probably make them go away, too. Use the manipulator's name often. The famous book by Dale Carnegie, entitled How to Win Friends and Influence People, states how important it is to use a person's name during conversations. This method improves your understanding, and to make it even more effective, use the form of the person's name that they liked the most. When you use their name rather often, they would feel close to you. If the manipulator is not that insidious, hearing their name will still have a positive effect on them. In addition, they might not go through with the manipulation. Do not break eye contact. Just like the previous tips, the point of this technique is to make the manipulative person lose their focus and concentration. When the manipulator approaches you and asks you for something, just say no sternly. Of course, this will not be enough for a manipulator, so when they ask again, look them in the eye and say no again. Do not break eye contact. A manipulator will try to bring down your defenses by reciprocating your gaze, but you can turn this back on them by making it a staring contest. Do not break eye contact with a manipulator to make them uncomfortable and lose focus on what they are doing. The awkwardness they feel may cause them to think twice about approaching and victimizing you once again. Keep them from generalizing. One of the basic strategies employed by a manipulative person is to take something specific and then take it massively out of context. After that, they will use it as an example of your usual behavior. The manipulator does this to shame you into submission. For instance, your spouse is angry because you forgot to take the trash out one time and then you were getting an earful about how you were always doing this. This is even though you just forgot to do it this one time as far as you can remember. However, your spouse continues to say that you always bow out when it comes to doing chores. To counter this kind of manipulation, you can ask the manipulator for examples of the other instances when you last made this discretion. For instance, you can say, "Maybe you're right. Can you refresh my memory of the last couple of times that I recently made this mistake?" Odds are, they will not be able to give you an honest answer, making them the potential manipulator to back off. Repeat your answer as needed. A broken record can be quite annoying, so use this same principle on a potential manipulator. Note that they absolutely hate hearing the same words repeatedly, particularly if it is an answer they did not like to hear. If they continue to pester and pressure you so you will grant their demands, provide them with a repetitive response. Make sure that you are saying your reply phrase using a monotonous tone. Strip your voice of all emotions and say it repeatedly until the other person gives up. Your universal response should sound like you do not care at all. Here is a sample exchange where you can apply this technique. "I thought we had an understanding." Let's stop discussing this. "Can you even hear me? Did you even understand what I said?" Let's stop discussing this. "Are you just stupid? Or are you just not even trying to understand what I said?" Let's stop discussing this. Distract yourself and do your best to relax. Here is another way for you to protect yourself against manipulation. Distract yourself so you will not even hear the manipulator. A good trick you can always try is as follows. Imagine that the person who is trying to manipulate you is inside a fish tank with thick glass walls and no sound can go through it. You will only see the other person's lips moving, but you cannot hear any sound coming from their mouth. Distance yourself physically. One more technique that a manipulator can use to make their target uncomfortable and easier to manipulate is to get right up in their face. They would intentionally violate their victim's personal space. To counter this method, just create a space between you and the manipulator. This should give you enough space so you can think properly and defend yourself more effectively. You can also stay away from them by telling them right away that you are busy and you have no time to accommodate them. Defending yourself against manipulation may seem easy, but you should avoid assuming that you can always protect yourself all the time. Trust your gut always. Once you realize that someone is manipulating you, put up your defenses right away. Be proactive, too, by thinking of your next steps. Avoid being complacent. Otherwise, you will become even more vulnerable to manipulation. The dangers of being a dark psychology user. Dark psychology may affect its targets more, but it can also cause severe harm to whoever is using this questionable approach to influence people. If you are a beginner, it is highly suggested to try other techniques first before delving into this insidious side of influence. You need to know what kind of dangers you will be subjecting yourself to when you start reading the mind and the body language of those around you through dark psychology manipulation tactics. If you learned about these dangers and you are okay with what could possibly happen, you are free to practice your skills. Why do people resort to using dark psychology? You may have your own set of reasons for why you are considering learning about and using dark psychology. However, others may not share your reasons. Even though there are certain risks to using dark psychology techniques, there are also reasons why people are somewhat compelled to use them, especially when it comes to decoding body language. These include: they want power. Dark psychology has tactics designed to manipulate and control others. This can provide you with a sense of power and control over them. For some, having power over others is more than enough reason to practice dark psychology, especially those with psychotic tendencies. Those with psychotic tendencies just want to see others behave like they're puppets, and not necessarily because they want to achieve anything. They want something another person has. You can also use dark psychology if another person has something that you covet and you want to get it without resorting to outright stealing. Some insidious people would either persuade or downright manipulate others to get as much out of them as they possibly can. Typically, this is used by unscrupulous people who want to separate people from their wallets. You will usually find that those who run Ponzi schemes are typically using dark psychology techniques. Oftentimes, they convince people to invest money in their get-rich-quick schemes through gaslighting and emotional manipulation. Once they have gotten their victims' money, they would disappear into thin air. As mentioned earlier, the people who usually have no qualms about using dark psychology are those who have the dark triad personality traits. In other words, they keep on doing what they want without caring about its effects on the victims. They wish to gain control. Manipulative people also have narcissistic tendencies, which means that they put themselves over others. This kind of thinking usually means that manipulative people are unable to commit to a long-term relationship, though they also like the intimacy that usually comes with it. Some of them are only therefore after sex, which they often get by manipulating their partners to receive their sexual advances positively. Sometimes the manipulation tactics can be borderline sexual abuse. However, the victim has already been conditioned to be more open to their manipulator's advances. Although using manipulation for sex can also be regarded as sexual assault, the manipulator can use other dark psychology techniques to gaslight or emotionally manipulate their victims into thinking that they did nothing wrong. There is also a high chance that they will blame the victim instead. Effects of dark psychology on the user. As useful as dark psychology is, it comes with a set of risks for the user. Yes, these techniques tend to do significant damage to the target, but they can also affect the user negatively. Here's how. Erodes one's trustworthiness. Using deception and manipulation won't exactly gain you a lot of friends. It's quite the opposite, really. Despite being successful in manipulating someone to do what you want, this does not mean they liked and appreciated you for it. Regardless if you can argue that your use of deceptive means led to mutually beneficial effects, the fact remains that you used another person as a tool. Even if you don't have Machiavellian tendencies or you may just be ignorant of the fact, the end will never justify the means. The person you manipulated will always have a sense of distrust in you, and they will probably tell the others about what you did. Makes you untrustworthy, too. The more you use dark psychology to read other people's body language and behavior, the more you will think that those around you are also inherently evil. This will even get worse if you let your biases get the best of you, because then you will only see the evil in every person you encounter. You may become a neurotic mess who suspects everyone, even your loved ones, all the time. This results in you alienating yourself from them. This condition is also likely to get worse, causing you to develop other mental health problems, such as anxiety and depression. Some even develop schizophrenia. Skews one's moral compass. This means that even if you are fully aware that your deeds are inherently wrong, you still end up finding excuses for your actions. The reason is that humans naturally have this tendency to justify their actions even if those are wrong. They would forgive themselves for their transgressions as long as they benefit from them. You naturally believe that you are a moral and upstanding person. However, after you introduce yourself to dark psychology and practice it, you will realize that your morality will be put to the test. The more you use dark psychology, the more it will chip away at your morality. Do it long enough without checking yourself, and you will no longer see the dark side of these methods. Get you into legal troubles. Forcing someone to do something has legal repercussions. For instance, if you use dark psychology in dating, like when you manipulate a person to go to bed with you, the other person can still press charges in case they feel like you violated them, even if it is borderline legal. Even if you end up escaping the lawsuit, just the fact that you will be summoned to a courtroom multiple times will cost a lot of money and waste plenty of your time. You also have to be careful when using dark psychology in business practices. Getting another person to sign a financial contract under coercion can sometimes nullify the legality of the agreement, as one can argue that it was done under false pretenses. You may find a way out of it, but it usually involves exorbitant fees. If you could not talk your way out of the lawsuit, you will be seeing some jail time. Leads you toward a life of crime. There are also severe cases when your constant use of dark psychology may turn you into a full-blown criminal. This may happen if your narcissism and Machiavellianism worsens. In that case, you may no longer view people as human beings. You will even begin to look at them as being inferior to you. In other words, you believe that the only person who matters is you, while the others are dispensable. When this happens and you develop a full-blown mental illness, you may not even second-guess murdering someone just to get your desired results. Your illusions of grandeur will be so significant, causing you to forget that you have to follow laws. You can avoid this if you were able to receive psychiatric help before even reaching this point. How to keep your morals in check when using dark psychology. At its core, dark psychology is a tool used for insidious purposes. However, is there a way to use these techniques without falling into the dark side? Is there a way to use dark psychology in an ethical manner? Can you really use this and not become corrupted with power? Yes, there is a way for you to still remain somewhat ethical when using dark psychology in things, like reading body language and manipulation. There are several ways to ensure that your morals are still intact while using rather dark techniques. Have a clear purpose. One way to retain your morals, even when using dark tools, is to set a clear purpose and develop a set of values to help guide your actions. Having a purpose will help keep you grounded and somewhat prevent you from going too far. In addition, it also helps if you choose to use dark psychology to benefit another without encroaching too much into their personal space. For instance, you can use dark psychology tactics to persuade a friend to stop smoking or help your spouse overcome fears. You should also make sure that you set clear boundaries to avoid causing harm to your target or hurting them unnecessarily. Ask consent if possible. Although dark psychology typically relies on discretion and secrecy, if you want to be somewhat ethical, then you have to inform the person about what you will be doing. Let's say that you are helping a loved one recover from a mental trauma or addiction. Before doing anything, explain the process that you will be putting them through. You don't need to go through the specifics, but you should at least tell them what kinds of results you are going for. This way, the other will not feel violated and you will be able to help. Be aware of the potential harm you will be doing. You can also keep your morality intact even if you are a dark psychology user if you constantly remind yourself of the risks and consequences associated with it. Avoid using it without thinking of its negative effects on your target. Also, you should be prepared for any possible backlash that might come from you using dark psychology techniques. If you ever get caught using these techniques, you should be accountable and admit your sins. Lying, denying, and not being responsible will only drag you deeper into the dark triad of behavioral traits. Balance it with empathy and compassion. You can also keep your moral compass pointing in the right direction even when you are using dark psychology tactics and invading a person by reading their body language if you balance it with compassion and empathy. Remember that you will be using it with another human, someone who also has real feelings. This means you have to treat each interaction with them with kindness and respect. Even though you can use dark psychology to manipulate a person using their vulnerabilities, that does not mean you should, at least not all the time. Never lose sight of the human aspect whenever you are interacting with others. Avoid treating and perceiving them as tools that you can use to accomplish your desires. Constantly question your motives. Learn and understand what you intend to do and the reason or purpose behind it. You should always question your motives for using dark psychology. Make sure that you can give yourself a reasonable answer. If you find that you are moving the goalposts just so you can justify your reason, you have to rein yourself in. Not doing so will give you a reason to do more insidious things. Be responsible enough to check yourself every now and then, since the only one who can do that for you is yourself. The main reason is that you will most likely be using dangerous manipulation tactics to weasel yourself out of the confrontation. While dark psychology is a powerful tool, it can corrupt you easily if you use it carelessly. Be extra careful when using this technique for reading body language and manipulating and persuading others to avoid seeing yourself falling off the deep end. Conclusion. Now that you've finished reading this book, you have surely gathered information about body language reading and the concepts and techniques behind it. You have also learned how to use this new skill to influence and manipulate people. As a beginner, it is crucial to practice regularly so you can master this powerful and useful skill. With enough time and commitment to practice, you will find yourself reading other people without even thinking about it. Hopefully, this book has enlightened you with everything related to reading and decoding body language. Especially with the help of proven techniques like NLP and dark psychology. You are now aware of how to use these techniques in conjunction with body language to persuade and manipulate others. Just remember that while reading body language is an important tool you can use to make your life much easier, it is still crucial to proceed to use it with caution. Be responsible and careful when using body language reading techniques so you won't end up harming yourself and those around you. Good luck.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.